Chapter 426, Councilman Scythian. Scythian teleported his golden ship to the Silverspire family's peak with a click of his fingers. The wall of desolation chi had actually blocked his attempt at opening a pathway through reality via a portal, so he had been forced to tap into his inner world to teleport the entire ship instantly. It used far more chi, but he had been in a rush to escape. Standing on the ship's bow, he let out a small sigh before addressing the enforcers gathered behind him at a respectful distance on the deck. Everyone disembark and gather in the main hall, he instructed the awaiting enforcers who had accompanied him. Yes, Councilman Scythian, the enforcers replied respectfully and bowed deeply before doing as instructed. Despite the outward respect they showed, his senses were in tune enough to feel the resentment and loathing from some of them. But he was unfazed. They were Star Core realm cultivators, mere ants to a monarch realm like him. While he was a beacon of power for the Celestial Empire, they were pawns. Once they were all out of sight, Scythian pulled his hand out from the ample folds of his robes. It was shaking. What is wrong with me? His heart was oddly gripped with terror, an emotion he hadn't felt in centuries except when faced with the World Tree. He gestured for the demon sword he had restrained to float closer, and he looked up. It was larger than he was tall, crafted from a living metal that radiated a bloodlust so thick he could smell it. However, what really concerned him was the black mist coating the blade, which was melting away his spatial chi. Desolation chi, the enemy of all, including the heavens, an affinity whose sole desire is to bring death and ruin upon the world. A shaky sigh left his lips. He couldn't believe he had witnessed such an affinity being wielded by such a powerful cultivator. It was both terrifying and beautiful. It wasn't a known affinity to the masses. However, when Scythian reached the pinnacle of understanding in spatial Tao, he saw the possible paths forward. What could be described as the dark path was desolation. While spatial chi was like the glue that held everything together, desolation was what would happen should that glue melt away. Chaos, destruction, ruin. He had dismissed the temptation of treading down that path. Cultivating it would be a nightmare, and as a destruction affinity, it required deep comprehension of every Tao to be effective. But after experiencing how it felt to face a desolation cultivator, he was intrigued, giddy with excitement and fear. He was excited to witness the possibilities of desolation chi and feared that he, of all people, had felt pressured to retreat from a mid-stage nascent soul realm cultivator. He was a monarch realm cultivator, a man who was supposed to be unrivaled by any except the World Tree and perhaps the chairman if he went all out. Dare I say it, the discovery of this powerhouse is the greatest of the last 1,000 years. Scythian eyes narrowed at the floating demon sword. I can't let anyone in the Celestial Empire learn of this. Not the chairman, nor Phalorian Lysanthos. Getting on this powerhouse's good side is my chance to surpass them. Scythian was one of the 2 monarch realms in the Flower Accord. Yet, because it took him longer to ascend and form his inner world due to the complexities of spatial affinity, Phalorian Lysanthos managed to secure the leadership position over the Flower Accord before he could. A reality Scythian refused to accept. Anyone capable of reaching the monarch realm was a deeply ambitious and power-hungry person, and Scythian was no exception. He wanted to rule not only over the Flower Accord but also the entire Celestial Empire. Until now, such a dream had seemed hopeless as his cultivation slowed to a crawl. Since the 9th layer of creation's chi density was so sparse, even with grand chi gathering formations and drinking the World Tree's sap, progressing his cultivation felt like trickling droplets into a vast ocean. It's also why he had to avoid confronting the desolation cultivator further. Gathering a few more drops of chi took weeks, but expending it through a technique took a mere second. Hilariously enough, this phenomenon is what kept the Celestial Empire at peace and the fights verbal rather than hurling chi-filled attacks at one another and devastating the lands below. If 2 monarch realms fought, the true winners of the fight would be the other monarch realm cultivators who didn't participate. The shaking of his hand finally stopped, and he smiled. He felt like this was a defining moment to change his future path from one of monotony and being ordered around to taking charge of what was rightfully his. Reaching his hand up, he cautiously hovered it near the demon sword. He could feel its intense hunger and the promise of ruin from the desolation chi shrouding it. Relax, demon sword. I'm not your enemy, and I can't keep you. Scythian explained, and he used spatial chi to hide his voice. Listen, I plan to return you to your owner, but first, I need a favor. I will be leaving you here with the Silver Spires and all the enforcers. Now you see, these enforcers are loyalists to the chairman, an enemy of mine. They know of your existence and of your owner's powers. Not ideal, right? So here's the favor, I want you to slaughter them all. Let none survive. The demon sword shuddered with excitement. I will be trapping you in a spatial formation, but I will leave a weakness in it during its creation that you can overcome with the desolation chi surrounding you. Wait for the perfect moment to strike after I have gone. Okay? He felt like the sword said yes. But he didn't speak sword. Nor had he ever talked with a sentient weapon like this before. Good, now follow me. This is going to be fun. Scythian gently used telekinesis to bring the sword with him, and to his relief, it didn't fight back. As he walked across the courtyard toward the towering palace of the Silverspire family, he recalled the desolation cultivator he had encountered. Whoever it was, they seemed quite territorial. It was as if they had a line that they weren't willing to cross, even when something of theirs had been taken. I felt the chi originating from far outside of my own spiritual sense range, so perhaps this went down at the very edge of this cultivator's range of control? If that's so, there's no telling if they won't move closer or if they will send some of their disciples to retrieve the sword. Either way, I have no plans to be here when that happens. I'll let the enforcers and the Silverspire family absorb their rage, and hopefully, the demon sword will put in a good word for me, and we can foster relations. He hadn't gotten off on the best foot with the desolation cultivator, but as the technically stronger cultivator between the two, he hoped they could reach a level of mutual respect and put this incident behind them. Though somehow, I doubt that a wielder of desolation chi will be the most open to offering forgiveness. It takes a certain level of hatred for the world to cultivate desolation chi, after all. Scythian strode into the audience chamber with the demon sword in tow, and the weight of 100 stares settled on him like a lead-lined cloak. The audience hall was an overwhelmingly extravagant display of wealth, ornate carvings, gold leaf-coated pillars, and flowing silver banners, but he barely spared it a glance. To him, these demonic cultivators were nothing more than wilderness-dwelling savages, their attempts at grandeur a pale imitation of true wealth. It was tacky and rushed. Anyone could dig up some metals and hang them up. What this place lacked was the profound weight that the historical sites of the Celestial Empire had. An amused smile adorned his lips. It would seem that during my brief excursion, they used the time to set up a proper audience rather than the rushed affair from earlier. While it had been a confused gathering before, men and women with striking metallic hair and piercing eyes now lined the chamber on either side. The vast majority bore dull copper or iron hues, their position in the hall and clothes betraying a silent hierarchy. As his gaze traveled further into the room, ascending the grand steps that led to a group of elevated seats, he noted a shift. The further up he looked, the more their hair lightened, transitioning from dull bronze to gleaming silver. Find this and other great novels on the author's preferred platform. Support original creators. At the peak, 4 women were sitting upon the lording seats, the weight of their star core presences shifting the chi around them. Beyond their higher cultivation, the only other distinction between them and those below was the sheer excess of jewelry they wore. Gold, jade, and precious stones dripped from their fingers, ears, and necks, an almost grotesque display of wealth. Yet, to Scythian, they might as well have been wearing iron shackles. All that mattered in this world was the power of cultivation, not these trinkets. Other than simple white robes and spatial rings, he didn't need such displays of wealth. He preferred more subtle things. For example, his robes were as plain as the iron-haired people here, except for one crucial detail. As customary of the flower accord, his robes were embroidered with a single flower representing him. His chosen flower was the Queen of the Night, a simple and unassuming white flower found on a type of cactus. Most would dismiss the simple flower, thinking it showed his purity and lack of desire. However, the flower only bloomed once a year during the night and wilted before dawn. As the time of this blooming was random, one would miss the flower's appearance unless they kept a careful eye on the cactus every night. For Scythian, it represented his sly nature and plans for the future. Such a simple flower held so much meaning compared to the pointless jewelry these cultivators adorned like a second layer of skin. He paused at the base of the steps and looked up at the Silverspire women sitting with the Starweaver family standing behind them. It was almost laughable how they sat on thrones looking down at him as if they meant anything. They were weaker than the disposable pawns under him, yet they were the peak of this backwater family. Perhaps if they were going to live much longer, he would demand their respect. But what use was respect from the dead? That desolation cultivator was coming, one way or another, if he left the demon sword here, and he had seen what this sword could do as it butchered those Star Core realm cultivators. Councilman, you have returned faster than expected and with a weapon of some kind. The woman in the center who had introduced herself as the Silverspire Grand Elder's first wife, Zenobia Silverspire, said, "Was it the dreaded Soul Eater plaguing these lands that caused one of our airships to sound their alarms?" "It was not," Scythian replied, gesturing to the demon sword beside himself. This sentient demon sword was rampaging near Argentum. "Oh, it was just a sword," Zenobia chuckled and relaxed. "I feared the Soul Eater was knocking at our gates." "You have nothing to fear for now," Scythian said causally. "Before I captured it, this sword destroyed an airship bound for the city and a few Star Core realm guards. But it's safe now." Their eyes widened as they looked at the restrained sword with fear. "A ship was destroyed? Do you know any details about it?" The third wife, Selene Silverspire, hastily asked. Scythian shook his head and honestly couldn't care less. He had been sent here by the chairman on a simple mission. Oversee the establishment of the new branch of the Eternal Pursuit Pavilion in Nitro's city. Initially, the chairman had sent a force of enforcers loyal to him, but they were wiped out to the east of here before reaching Nitro's city. So Scythian had been ordered to investigate and deal with whatever threat had taken out the enforcers and to then return. Deciding to be cautious, he stopped at the Silverspire Peak to gather information. That is when he learned about this Soul Eater that killed anything that had gone near it without a trace. He had planned to use the enforcers given to him and force the Silverspires to venture eastward and act as bait, but that had changed. What if that desolation cultivator is this dreaded Soul Eater? Encroaching on their land would be seen as an act of war. I should sit back for now and let the situation unfold. It's not like he was in a rush. While the chairman wanted it done as soon as possible, Scythian could give any number of excuses for a delay. While spatial affinity wasn't as good in combat, it did give him the most freedom to travel. There was no chance the chairman would ever step out of the Celestial Empire, let alone all the way out here. He simply had too much to lose. This situation was simply perfect. Scythian could lay the foundations out here for his takeover of the Celestial Empire. Away from the prying eyes of the council, he just had to silence the witnesses and gain the trust of the Desolation Cultivator. Then everything would fall into place. The Silverspire women exchanged a concerned look, likely regarding the destroyed ship. "Your Excellency, did you happen to see any insignias or characteristics of the people on board?" The fourth wife, Lyriana, asked. Unlike the other three wives, her star core pressure was respectfully suppressed rather than casually radiating out. Her gaze was also one filled with ambition. Scythian shrugged. "I arrived after the ship had already been destroyed." "Elders." Scythian raised a brow as he was interrupted by a shout. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw a disheveled silver-haired man wearing a robe embroidered with silver and purple stars. "Oh heavens no!" one of the wives shouted as she stood up. It was the third wife, Selene Silverspire. She clutched the armrest of her chair and looked in horror. "Is my son alive? Where is he?" "Mistress, he's dead." The man pointed and glared at the floating sword. That demon sword tore him to pieces and devoured his soul. Shards of cosmic chi-infused metal appeared from the folds of Selene Silverspire's robes and trembled with rage. "This thing killed my son?" She glared at the sword and screamed as a volley of the star metal shot toward it. "Please calm yourself." Scythian casually slapped the volley of metal away without even needing to coat his hand in chi. How can I? That thing killed my son. I have to." "Then you will die too," Scythian said with finality. His voice crackled with power and seemingly traveled between dimensions. "I'm restraining it now, but this sword is exceptionally dangerous." Selene blinked before collapsing into her seat. Her face was pale and distraught, and her eyes trembled as she stared at the sword. The other wives at her side had differing expressions. The first and second wives seemed amused at the third wife's plight, while the fourth just looked relieved, likely because it wasn't her child that had died. Scythian didn't understand them. He had never bothered to have offspring of his own for this reason. They were expensive and unappreciative, and if they were to die, he risked forming hard demons. I have more to report, mistress. The survivor of the attack said, causing Celine to ever so slightly perk up as if it was going to be good news. But Scythian could already tell it was anything but. Go on, what is it? Celine insisted. While that demon sword was the one to slay your son, its owner is the one responsible. Before he died, your son noticed a gaze watching him from above. He said we had earned the ire of a fake god. A fake god? Celine muttered, and her eyes widened as she realized something. Was it? Yes, mistress, it was the all-seeing eye. Celine looked crestfallen, and she stared up at the ceiling. First the Soul Eater, and now the all-seeing eye is attacking us? Who is this all-seeing eye? Scythian asked and felt the room freeze. The wives exchanged a cautious look, but it was Liriana who answered him. Little is known about him, but he is said to be a benevolent god capable of gifting mortals the ability to cultivate, allowing him to quickly amass millions of devoted believers. Benevolent? Celine blurted out in rage. Perhaps your dainty little head is clueless about the meaning of words? There's absolutely nothing benevolent about that evil god. He wiped out the Nitros family and forcefully overtook Nitros City, and it looks like we are next. Celine is correct. Zenobia weighed in. How could you say such nonsense? Ahem. Scythian coughed into his hand. You said he can gift cultivation? How is that done? Through pills, Zenobia replied respectfully. It was clear she wanted to remain on his good side despite the chaotic nature of this meeting. Pills? Yes, she nodded. I heard they are made by the Ashfallen Trading Company. Ashfallen Trading Company? Scythian played with the words in his mouth. They felt familiar, yet he couldn't put his finger on it. It's an arm of the Ashfallen sect. Liriana helpfully added. The Ashfallen sect? Scythian snapped open his Eternal Pursuit Pavilion pendant and checked the rankings. Sure enough, there it was. Celestial Empire, Divine. Ashfallen Sect, Divine. Frozen Star Sect, Monarch Realm. Blood Lotus Sect, pending re-evaluation. The Ashfallen Sect was right below the Celestial Empire and was given the same classification of Divine, meaning it was a sect overseen by a deity. Scythian narrowed his eyes. If this Ashfallen sect and all-seeing eye were so hostile and had overtaken Nitros City, there was no way the chairman would have gotten permission to open a branch of the Eternal Pursuit Pavilion in that city, unless he had gotten permission. Maybe he already knows about the Desolation Cultivator? Scythian gritted his teeth. Is that why he wanted me to help them set up the branch but then leave? What other dirty secrets are you hiding out here, old man? Scythian snapped the pendant closed. If a deity is involved, I must ask for guidance from the council and more reinforcements. He lied as his hands crackled with spatial chi. He walked around the demon sword and drew in the air. I will create a spatial seal on this demon sword to keep it restrained while I'm gone. Councilman. An enforcer tried to interrupt him, but he dismissed the cultivator. All enforcers are instructed to remain here with the Silverspire family to guard this sword until I return. Scythian finished the slightly wrong seal and vanished into his inner world with a click of his fingers. Traversing it, he headed toward the Celestial Empire. He wanted to be standing near the crystal tree when the enforcer's life orbs cracked to avoid being blamed for their deaths. Chapter 427, Hospitality. Sullivan felt it, everyone did. He was startled awake out of his drunken slumber. His darkened room on the top floor of his brothel reeked of booze, sweat, and sorrow hung in the air. He had returned here a mess after losing his cultivation due to being mind-controlled by Vincent Nitros. He groaned as he rolled over on a heap of clothes on the floor beside his bed. He blinked the stars out of his eyes and squinted at the stained bed. I must have rolled out of it during my sleep. I feel so weak. His stomach growled loudly, and his throat felt parched. Fuck, he cursed out loud. I have to eat and drink so often now, it's exhausting. It was almost unheard of for a cultivator to be reduced to a mortal and survive. Now plagued by hunger and thirst, which he was unused to. He was a wreck. He also had to sleep for hours, yet no matter how much he slept, he constantly felt exhausted, and if his runny nose was anything to judge, he'd gotten sick. Grumbling in pain and self-pity, he pushed himself up and staggered to his feet. He couldn't stay wallowing away on the floor. The feeling gripping the air that had awoken him was worsening like a rising tide gathering at his feet and threatening to swallow him. He stumbled through the dark room, his arms searching before him. He felt blind since losing the spiritual perception he had enjoyed so much as a cultivator. Curse the fucking heavens, he swore as he nearly tripped on random piles of clothes and tipped over furniture he had taken his frustrations out on. Eventually, he made it to the window. With an annoyed huff, he placed his palms on the windowsill and stared outside with bloodshot eyes. The storm outside obscured much of the world in a blanket of gray clouds and cascading rain, but standing out like a beacon in the distance was him, the overlord of the region and, as he had come to learn, the leader of the Ashfallen sect. The tree's vast canopy, visible over a mirage that obscured most of the peak, was enraged. Divine energy in the form of golden lightning crackled between its branches, illuminating the sky. What is this feeling hanging in the air like the coming of doom? Did something happen? Sullivan let out a shaky breath. Tearing his eyes away from the enraged godly being, he looked down at the street and noticed many people either looking through windows if they had them or peeking through half-closed doors. So I wasn't the only one who felt his wrath, Sullivan mused as he searched the people's expressions. Fear, worry, and sadness haunted everyone he saw. Their eyes were darkened, their posture drooped, and a smile couldn't be seen. Sullivan understood their pain. Darklight City would never be the same after the night of slaughter. Millions had died that night, leaving behind broken families. There were missing elder brothers, cute little sisters, kind old grandparents, annoying neighbors, and hardworking shop owners. Everyone had lost someone they knew or loved. The night of slaughter spared nobody from death or a lifetime of grief. It's the ordinary people who suffer the most when gods fight, Sullivan muttered to himself, a saying as old as time itself as he looked at Red Vine Peak again. The lives of the many are dictated by the powerful few. I wanted to be one of them once, to stand at the peak and be seen as a god. He shook his head. Every time he closed his eyes, he was haunted by that all-encompassing eye that had stared into his soul. Humans, whether cultivators or not, didn't have a chance to fight against that. Thankfully, we don't have to, Sullivan whispered as the heavens seemingly trembled overhead under the tree's rage. That godly tree was one of the few who used their power to benefit others, ignoring the giving away of pills that gave mortals access to cultivation or the city they built to house mortals. For Sullivan, he trusted the Overlord because they didn't have to save him from Vincent's control. But they did. Sullivan believed that compassion is why the general population still seemed to hold faith in the Ashfallen sect and the all-seeing eye despite the tragedy. It also helped that the people weren't kept in the dark like usual and were actually offered an explanation for the incident. Vincent Nitros, ruler of the Blood Lotus sect, had infected people and used them as pawns against the Ashfallen sect during an assault. Vincent Nitros was declared defeated, but the infected people could not be saved. Sullivan knew the last part was a lie, he was living proof. But having been a cultivator once, he knew how much effort saving just himself must have been. It was impressive that the Ashfallen sect had managed to keep the casualties only to the infected rather than simply blasting the entire city. How the infected died was not specified to the people, but Sullivan knew. After Stella saved him, the girl went elsewhere, and the godly tree ignored him. So Sullivan decided to escape. During his descent from Red Vine Peak to return home, he witnessed horrors he would never forget. The crazed people rushing up the mountain ran into an army of armored monsters in service to the Ashfallen sect. Despite being outnumbered thousands to one, these tiny monsters slaughtered the humans with ruthless efficiency and even devoured them whole. With no hope of making his way through the horde alive with his cultivation stripped, he had asked the monsters to assist him in getting down the mountain. To his surprise, they happily agreed to help. As they reached the foot of the mountain, the horde of crazed people coming up from Darklight City suddenly crumpled to the forest floor like puppets cut from their strings, dead. Their souls having collapsed from having too much foreign chi pumped into them. Sullivan still vividly remembered walking through a sea of corpses to get home. By morning, they had all disappeared as if it had all been a terrible dream. Yet the scars of that night could still be seen and felt through the city. For example, the bakery opposite his brothel, a favorite for his customers, now stood empty. The pot-bellied owner was nowhere to be seen. Stale bread, hard as stone and speckled with mold, lined the windowsill, and the shop's door had been left ajar. It creaked on its hinges, and there was a constant thump as the gale threw it around and banged into the shop's wall. The narrative has been illicitly obtained. Should you discover it on Amazon, report the violation. I never bothered to try his bread. I regret that now. Sullivan trailed off as he looked at the house next door. Peeking out from the darkness of the house was a lone mother. He knew her, had even been told her name. But he hadn't bothered to remember it. As a cultivator, he hadn't given a shit about a mortal's life story, how she had a loving husband who had grown sick or 2 kids that she needed to feed. He'd tuned out her sob story and had only cared about her body and face and whether or not she would bring in customers to his brothel. She had asked for a receptionist job, but he had turned her down and kicked her out, shouting in her face and demanding that she grovel before him. As he recalled how terribly he had treated her and saw her hollow expression, a feeling like never before welled up inside him. Perhaps it was the rage and despair radiating from the godly tree and blanketing the land, or maybe it was everything about the last few weeks hitting at once. But strength left his legs, and he collapsed against the wall. The corner of his eye dampened, and a warm tear trickled down his cheek. His nails dug into his skin as he gripped his chest. I'm such a pathetic bastard. Feeling sorry for myself and wallowing in self-pity because I'm not special or powerful anymore? Because I've been reduced to a mere mortal. His voice came out in rasps as his head pounded from dehydration, but he didn't give a shit. I looked down on mortals, thinking they were weak and lesser as if I was some heaven's chosen. But it was I who was weak. Without borrowed power flowing through my veins, haha. He wanted to scream, I can't even take fucking care of myself. I need to wake the fuck up. He slapped himself. It was like a resounding thunderclap through the dark room. The pain woke him up a second later. He inhaled sharply as his eyes widened. This is what it felt like to be alive. Screw those years of meditating on the heavens' worthless whispers. This feeling, this mortal pain in his cheek, was divine enlightenment. He felt reborn. For too long, he had been chasing power out of fear. The fear of death, but now that he had been reduced back to a mortal, he finally realized the beauty of knowing it would come to an end. Death comes for us all eventually. What truly matters is how you live and how you are remembered. A shaky chuckle escaped his bloodied lips as he got to his feet and strode through his room with renewed vigor. His back was straight, his stride long and filled with purpose. He kicked the piles of clothes out of the way until he reached the only piece of furniture that hadn't been overturned during his earlier rage. It was a desk, and on its surface was a lone bull cradling a bundle of fruits and a truffle. Stella had given them to him when he had lost his cultivation and promised they would help him, but he had been too self-absorbed in self-pity to bother. He didn't eat them. Instead, he picked the bowl up and left his room. The hallway and following staircases were empty, every one of his guests and workers having succumbed to Vincent's blood pills. He had thought he had nothing left. His business was gone, as was his cultivation and status. But as it turned out, there was one last thing. When he opened the door of his brothel, a blast of cold wind hit him in the face. Courageously stepping out into the fierce wind and rain, he strode through the mud barefoot and approached the woman's house. She looked at him, making his way toward her with an understandable mixture of fear and confusion. Master Sullivan, she said as he reached her doorway. Sullivan dropped to his knees with a wet squelch, causing her eyes to widen. Madam, he paused as he steeled his heart, may I know your name? My name? She seemed baffled. Your name, he insisted as he looked up and stared into her tear-stricken face. You told me once, but I was a self-absorbed fool who didn't bother remembering it. My name isn't important. It is. Sullivan shouted to the ground. You are important. As is your name. What is it, madam? Please tell me. Please. I'm begging you. Tell me one more time. At this point, the woman had taken several steps away from the door. Sullivan's head was drooped, his eyes set on the floor. The freezing rain pelted his back, and his shins went numb. As he thought, the woman wouldn't tell him again. It's Mary. A surprised gasp escaped his lips. Sullivan slowly looked up. My name is Mary, Master Sullivan. Mary, Mary. He played with the name, savoring every syllable. What a beautiful name you have. He held out the bowl of fruits and truffles he had been shielding. Please take these. What are these? Mary asked as she carefully took them from his frozen hands. The last thing I have. Sullivan felt a massive weight lift from his shoulder as he stood, and an apology for how terribly I treated you. He turned his back to the confused woman. Mary, I will carve that name into my soul and never forget. Though, please forget mine. I'm no master. I led a terrible life that isn't worth remembering. He left Mary behind and ventured into the rain. With the final burden of his past life as a cultivator gone, he walked forward without aim or purpose. He was now immortal with nothing to his name. If he were to fall dead here, nobody would miss or grieve him. He looked up at the gloomy skies as his body shook from the cold. Now, I can finally move on. Live out my days as a mortal, however many that may be, and die with nobody remembering me for good or bad. Mr. Sullivan, surprised. He looked behind him to see a lone woman bundled in robes running toward him through the storm. Is that Mary? He ran over to her. What are you doing out here? You're going to get cold. Huh? She kneeled over for a moment to catch her breath before looking up at him. I could say the same to you. But you're immortal, and so are you now, right? She gave him a sad smile. I saw the eyes of my husband before he passed. The human spirit knows when its time has come, and I see that in you now. She grabbed his hand. Hers were warm. Come with me. This city has experienced too much death to lose another. I'll make us a cup of tea, and we can have a chat. Is it poisoned? Sullivan said as a half-joke. After all he had done to her, he wouldn't have blamed the woman for drugging and robbing him. Not that he had anything left. Mary laughed for what looked like the first time in a while. Don't be ridiculous. Us mortals aren't nearly as ruthless as you cultivators. On second thought, I suppose we can be sometimes. But serious, please do come. Sullivan shook his head and stood rooted in place. I could never accept such hospitality. Mary wasn't taking no for an answer and tugged on his arm with surprising strength. I can't finish those fruits on my own. I got those fruits as a gift from the Princess of Ashlock, Sullivan explained. Eating them will restore my cultivation and turn me back into a monster. I'd rather not. Mary paused her tugging, and while looking deep into his eyes, she cupped his cheek with her palm and rubbed his face with her thumb. Would a monster cry knowing it has hurt another? Sullivan blinked at her words. You are not a monster, Sullivan, and the power of cultivation isn't inherently evil, she smiled. What matters is how you use it. Sullivan let Mary drag him through the rain as he processed her words. He wasn't sure why, but he felt his gaze once again land on the godly tree lording over the land. Despite working for the enemy and distributing so many blood pills that he was likely responsible for thousands of broken families, they had made an effort to save him with their godly powers. And now this lone mortal woman he used to look down on and treat like trash had saved him. The power to kill and destroy was reserved for the strong, but now he realized that the truly strong were those who could save others. It had taken him to lose everything to learn this truth. If there was someone who didn't deserve to live, it was him. Yet, out of the sea of bodies, he alone stood tall. He broke out into laughter. What's so funny? Mary asked over her shoulder. Life, Sullivan replied, feeling sentimental. Everyone calls it a gift, yet it's the one thing we all take for granted until we are shown how valuable it really is. Chapter 428, The Coming of Moros. Ashlock returned to Red Vine Peak with simmering rage. He knew it was due to his own carelessness, but he couldn't remember the last time he had been robbed. Why was that bastard from the Celestial Empire even there? I thought the strongest cultivator left in that region would be the freshly ascended Silverspire Grand Elder. Ashlock sighed. I suppose temporarily trading a weapon for the knowledge of that man's presence is valuable. If Stella had rocked up to Argentum with her usual attitude and pissed off that Monarch Realm's spatial cultivator, it could have been bad. But still, that begs the question. Why was he there? Is the Silverspire family colluding with the Celestial Empire to take me down? Riker and Sebastian couldn't betray him as they had signed oaths of loyalty, so they were in the clear. But the Silverspire family was free to do as they pleased. In fact, I can't really blame them. If I were a member of the Silverspire family and saw this unknown entity wipe out the Nitros family and take over their city in a single afternoon, I, too, would call upon a higher power for help. Either way, I will know the answer soon. My roots are closing in on Argentum, and I will still send an envoy there, just one far bigger and more armed than I had initially planned. There is a large influx of divine energy. Huh? Ashlock squinted at the notification. He had shown off to a few farmers over Argentum and perhaps harvested some divine energy from each of the Silverspire cultivators before they died, but that didn't feel like enough to warrant a large influx. Unless that monarch realm has figured out I'm the all-seeing eye? System. Can you tell me where it's coming from? Look at yourself from afar. That's an odd reply. Ashlock decided to humor the system and left his consciousness. Using his Eye of the Tree God skill, he looked at Red Vine Peak from above Darklight City. With such a perspective, it didn't take a genius to determine the reason. Divine lightning crackled between his branches, and a dark aura radiated from the mountain, blanketing the surroundings. Looking below, he saw people peeking at him through windows or cautiously through half-opened doors. They all looked terrified, sad, or broken. Not a single smile could be seen. It was like a city of the dead. Is this my fault? Ashlock quickly calmed down and reined in the negative aura he had been radiating. It's hard to believe that my anger over losing a sword can affect millions of people. He waited a moment, yet the people's expressions did not change. They remained as sullen as before. Strange. Did something happen? Ashlock wondered. He had been so focused on suppressing the beast tide in the meeting in Argentum that he hadn't checked on the mortals in a long time. He returned to Red Vine Peak, Anubis. Anubis rose from the shadows. Yes, Creator? Invite Jasmine's parents here. I need to speak with them. As you wish. Anubis sunk into the darkness. While waiting, Ashlock decided to help the Mudcloaks by moving the many ether chi trees onto Erebus. They had opened the hangar doors at the base of the mountain range by simply shifting the earth away with their chi. It looked like a giant maw in the earth. A single mudcloak stood on a pillar and waved around glowing sticks to direct him on where to place the trees, earning a chuckle out of Ashlock. Does this little guy think he works at an airport? Though I have to say, it's quite helpful. Erebus was frankly a behemoth and reminded Ashlock of an aircraft carrier in terms of its general shape and size. Dead center was Erebus, the peak star core void affinity tree that had been made out of the void-mind Grand Elder. Like planting candles on a cake, Ashlock equally spaced the 19 ether chi trees along the bastion's edge, forming a defensive perimeter. All that was left to place was Akasha, the tree he had personally named. Now, which side should I put her? At the front or the back? Ashlock mused. Both had advantages, but he ultimately decided to place Akasha at the front of the bastion. Once the tree was in place, the system once again asked him, do you wish to turn Akasha into a bastion? It will cost 1,000 sacrificial credits and the required materials to form a bastion core. Yes. Warning. You have placed Akasha on the existing bastion Erebus. What do you want to do? Options include merging the two cores into one, replacing Erebus with Akasha, or just do as we planned before. Ashlock cut off the notification. I want this flagship to have two dedicated bastion cores of differing affinities. I also desire all of the ether chi trees on the bastion to link up with Akasha. Since this bastion will have two distinct cores, do you want to rename it? That was a good question. Ashlock named the void tree Erebus after Greek mythology's primordial god of darkness and the underworld. While it did fit the general theme of the flagship, it felt odd to refer to the bastion by the name of only one of the trees. Furthermore, the name had been fitting before, as it had been a ship of black stone topped with a harrowing black tree harboring a gateway to the void. But now the flagship was covered in white phantom-like trees with starlight leaves. Akasha is a more ethereal-sounding name, rather than one that would strike fear or awe in those that heard it. Wait, system, will renaming this bastion consume my divine energy? Yes, the already named trees will maintain their names and status as beings you named. However, by giving the flagship a name, you will create a single entity that unites these trees and this bastion. Ashlock wanted this flagship to be as strong as it possibly could, so he was willing to use up the influx of divine energy to grant it a name. The question was, what would be suitable? Giving it the name of a god from my previous world's mythos should be suitable. I've already discovered that the more the name holds meaning, the better it is to grant. I think it's best to figure out what I want the flagship to inspire and then work backward. He still had the idea of the giant ship appearing like a ghost out of the ether and decimating anything it appeared next to with void attacks. He wanted those who heard of its name to think it was unbeatable and that your fate was already sealed should the ship hunt you. I want its presence to instill hopelessness, just like the faces of the mortals in Darklight City. Just, on the enemy's side rather than my own people. He searched his knowledge, and a single name stood out to him. Moros. It was the name of a lesser-known deity in the Greek mythos. Moros, the primordial personification of doom, fate, and inevitable destruction. If I remember correctly, Moros represents the inescapable end that all beings must face, whether it's death, ruin, or misfortune. Unlike other deities associated with fate, like the almost similarly named Moirai, who weave and cut the threads of life, Moros embodies the inescapable path toward doom itself. He doesn't just enforce destiny, he is the feeling of dread that accompanies knowing that doom is unavoidable. Also, I believe he was never described as having a physical form, he's more of an all-encompassing and inescapable cosmic force. Zeus even tried to start shit with him and realized it was a bad idea and quickly backtracked. A name that can strike fear and caution in the King of the Gods is definitely a suitable name for my flagship. Enjoying the story? Show your support by reading it on the official site. Ashlock paused to think it over for a moment more as this was important but ultimately settled on it. Moros, in summary, is that creeping sense of dread when you know something terrible is inevitable. That's exactly what I want people to feel when they hear or see my flagship. Do you wish to choose the name Moros? Yes, but first, let me put the flagship high in the sky so all the mortals can see its creation. I want this day to be put down in legend. Julian, Jasmine's father, and the mortal granted the role of head of logistics for the Ashfallen Trading Company, was having a bad day. Well, everyone in Darklight City was having more of a bad week, but for him specifically, today was a really bad day. It was sales report day. He had been sitting in a meeting room at the Ashfallen Trading Company's headquarters in the heart of Ashfallen City. The energy in the room mirrored the terrible weather outside, a lot of doom and gloom with an occasional flash of enraged lightning, mostly from Eric, their head of marketing. Like many in the room, Eric was an all-seeing eye devotionist and proudly wore his cult cloak like a second layer of skin. While others might hang theirs up or store them away except for special occasions, he always wore his without fail. Julian even suspected he slept in the thing. But that was beside the point. Apart from the reported drop in pill sales that he would have to inform Grand Elder Diana about, something else was wrong. Putting the meeting on hold, they had all gathered on the roof of the towering building. Huddling under the canopies of the demonic trees growing on the roof for some respite from the pouring rain, they all had their eyes set on Red Vine Peak in the distance. The divine tree that lorded over the lands had seemed enraged by something. Divine lightning had crackled between its branches, and a sense of foreboding had gripped the souls of all who looked on. That had ceased a few minutes ago, but everyone had remained watching. It was as if the promise of something else hung in the air, and it had delivered. What in the 9 realms is that? Eric's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Above the mountain peak, where moments before the divine tree had been seemingly angered at the heavens, a colossal black vessel of stone now hovered, as vast and imposing as the divine tree was tall. It hadn't flown in from the horizon or risen from the earth. It had simply appeared as if torn from the fabric of another reality and stitched into this one. Phantom-like trees wavered in and out of existence along its jagged surface, their ethereal branches clawing at the air. They didn't seem to belong to the mortal realm, or any realm, for that matter. Their forms flickered like half-remembered dreams as if reality itself struggled to contain them. Then, without warning, the air thickened. An oppressive weight of something ancient and inevitable pressed down on them, turning their curiosity in the ominous ship into cold, primal fear. Julian's breath caught in his throat as a sound crept into his mind, not through his ears but directly into his thoughts. It wasn't a noise in the traditional sense. Rather, it was a groaning hum, oscillating between low and high pitches. It gave him the feeling of walking alone through the forest at night and constantly checking his back to find nothing there. And then it came. From nowhere, a word etched itself into his consciousness. He had never heard it before, yet it echoed with the weight of ancient doom as if the realm itself wanted him to know of it. Moros. Julian's lips moved before he could stop them, his voice barely a whisper. Moros? Everyone snapped their heads toward him, eyes wide. But before he could question their reaction, Eric spoke, his voice hushed and tight with disbelief. You guys heard it too, huh? They all nodded. The fear gripping them slowly subsided over time as the divine tree did not react further, which meant it was likely an allied ship. If that ship is on our side, are we going to war again? Brenda, a woman in her late 40s, cautiously asked. Although her question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, all eyes landed on Julian. Don't look at me, Julian said annoyedly. It's hard not to. Your daughter is the Slaughter Princess's disciple, and the leader of the Ashfallen sect put you in this position. Eric refuted. Julian glared at Eric. Are you implying something? No. Eric raised his hands in surrender. We just hoped you would give us a little more insight into what is going on up there on that mountain's lofty heights. You know, unlike us regular mortals who can only look on from afar, you have interacted with the higher-ups from the Ashfallen sect, have you not? Julian clicked his tongue in annoyance. You know I'm bound to secrecy, as I've told you many times. Besides, I don't hear much from my daughter as she's usually training with her master. Besides that, I know as much as all of you. But do you think they are going to war again? Brenda insisted again, her eyes trembling from fear. I sure hope not, though that ship isn't a good indication. Julian sighed. The morale of the people from Ashfallen and Darklight City won't survive another night of slaughter-style incident. He looked to the floor. He had been lucky to not lose anyone that night, but that wasn't the case for many, including Eric and Brenda standing at his side, who had lost loved ones. As both of you are aware, unease and distrust in the Ashfallen sect that's already on the rise will transition into outright rage. There will be riots and so much death. Can't the Ashfallen sect do something about it? Eric said with a hint of spite. At this rate, they will drag the faith in the all-seeing eye down with them. The Ashfallen sect is the all-seeing eye. Julian wanted to say but kept it to himself. It was clear that they liked to keep the two entities separate. While some knew that the two were literally the same, it wasn't public knowledge. Most believed they were two very closely linked organizations with some overlap. They could do something about it, but I doubt they will. Julian ended up saying as they were waiting on him. It was a shame, but he couldn't blame them. They simply operate on a scale so far above us that nothing the mortals of Darklight City do will faze them. Riots will only further the misery down here. Don't they need us mortals? Though, Eric pointed out. Julian snorted. For what? To buy some pills? We handle the balance sheet here in the cities, but you should see their sales through the Eternal Pursuit Pavilion. It's on another level. The wealth of mortals simply can't compare to that of cultivators. Now, I'm not saying they deem us as worthless. Far from it. The fact they rescued many of us from Slimere, offered us free housing and food despite the terrible weather, gifted us the possibility of cultivation. And more shows the opposite of that. That's true, Eric sighed. I just can't go through that again, man. I really can't. I know, Julian replied. The last thing he wanted was war. Jasmine may get unnecessarily involved if the Ashfallen sect were to go to war. Even if she doesn't, if Stella dies, then we will all be fucked. Stella was unhinged but had an odd, caring side, as did the rest of the sect's inner circle. Julian was proud to work for the Ashfallen sect and felt they were fair and treated the mortals better than any cultivator family or sect had done before. While he understood war between cultivators for resources was inevitable, he still wished they could live peacefully. A different scale, huh? Eric said quietly for once as his eyes narrowed. I suppose that's true. I'm sure they are dealing with issues none of us can imagine, but would it kill them to show a little more humanity? Julian turned and glared at his subordinate. Eric, I know you are bitter and hurt after losing your son to the Night of Slaughter, but be careful what you say. You're talented and good at what you do. Don't throw it all away getting greedy. Greedy? Throw it all away? Eric snapped. My son, my precious little boy, ran barefoot in the mud like a crazed person on drugs. I desperately chased him until the forest where I saw him slaughtered, Julian. Don't come at me with that shit. Eric kicked the demonic tree he was sheltering under multiple times. Julian lunged forward and grabbed his shoulder, dragging him back. Get off me. Eric pushed his arm off. Are you insane? Julian shouted at him over the roaring wind and rain. You just kicked a demonic tree? So, what? Eric glared at him. Julian clamped Eric's head with his hands. The trees have eyes, Eric. You know that. You're not being yourself and thinking straight. Do you remember what happened to that cultivator who hurt a tree and was publicly executed? Yeah? Do you want that to be you? Cut the bullshit, Julian. Eric raged, spittle flying from his mouth. If the trees really did have eyes, that meant they watched on as my son was slaughtered. Butchered like a pig. You telling me to not throw it all away shows that you don't understand the pain I am Both of them fell deathly silent as a presence made itself known. Sorry to interrupt your little scuffle, gentlemen. A being had stepped out of Julian's shadow and loomed over the two. His face was bone-white like a skull, and instead of eyes, there were two flickering black flames. Julian didn't need to be a cultivator to know this monster was strong. Is this a reaper sent by the Ashfallen sect to kill Eric? Julian gritted his teeth. May I inquire who your excellency is? My name is Anubis, a humble servant of the Creator. Creator? The monster pointed to the divine tree in the distance. The one you also serve, no? Julian gulped. Eric was really fucked now. Yes. Look, Eric wasn't in his right mind. Please take me instead of him. I'm sure he will understand. That works for me, Anubis said, and Julian could see the disbelief on Eric's face. I didn't come for a human named Eric anyway. Julian felt the monster place their hand on his shoulder. I came for you. Chapter 429, Funeral Plans. Ashlock couldn't believe how much divine energy naming the flagship had cost him. System, did you make a mistake? Naming the flagship cost as much as naming Akasha, who is an ancient spirit tree. Why did it cost so much? Didn't I just give the lump of rock that makes up the bastion a name? When naming something, you give it a state of consciousness and weave a new thread of fate that ties it to you. Since Moros didn't exist in any capacity until now, you efficiently created a new existence. Furthermore, since the name you picked carried so much intention, I consumed more divine energy to shape Moros in your image. In my image? Ashlock said, similar to when I consciously envision what I want from an ent during its creation, right? Similar, but far less potent. For Moros, all I managed to do was attach a feeling of doom to its presence. When the ship appears, everyone will know its name deep in their soul. It's not quite telepathy, more like a divine hallucination. For now, it is just a harmless whisper. However, as the ship becomes more infamous, its dooming presence will increase. That's cool. Whoa, it's exactly what I wanted. Ashlock mused as he looked at the flagship floating overhead. Rain was pouring off its sides, and the leaves of the ether chi trees seemed unfazed by the winds. The jagged black stone that made up its hull really added to Moros' ominous presence. So besides its name being known to all when it appears, what else can the flagship do now? Anything another bastion can do but twice. Due to having two cores, you can have 2 layers of shields, twice the amount of artillery, and have a far thicker storm. Of course, this doesn't come for free. Moros consumes an ungodly amount of chi to operate compared to your other bastions. Makes sense. Not only does it have 2 cores, but they are both high-stage star core realm trees with rare affinities. But I can pull chi from the many star core ether chi trees on the bastion during combat. So it should be fine. It's just overusing void chi that I have to be careful of. Creator, I have returned. Anubis interrupted Ashlock's musings as he announced his return and stepped out of the shadows with a terrified Julian and a confused but relaxed Catherine in tow. Welcome back, Ashlock said to his helpful shadow ent. Anubis nodded as he shepherded the 2 mortals to stand before Ashlock, and they both strained their necks to look up into his canopy. They were Jasmine's parents, whom Ashlock had saved from Slimere. They could cultivate, as he had given them truffles, but it seemed neither had progressed much. Julian was a middle-aged man wearing a well-tailored suit with a neat blonde beard. Dark circles were under his eyes, suggesting a recent lack of sleep. Meanwhile, Catherine had dark green hair and the aura of a kind mother. Whatever was bothering Julian erupted before Ashlock got a chance to speak. Ashlock, please forgive him. Julian said, words pouring out his mouth. Eric wasn't in his right mind. He lost his son, so he's not thinking straight. Anubis raised his hand, silencing the man. You're right. Julian's voice dropped to a whisper as he looked to the floor. Eric did a terrible thing. He should be punished accordingly. I have no idea what you are talking about, Ashlock said through Anubis as his abyssal whispers, skill would kill them. No matter how much he tried to rein it in, a mortal would never survive the mental strain of an A- grade mental attack skill. Julian seemed flustered and confused as he stared into Anubis's flickering flames for eyes. Eric kicked a tree in anger. Isn't that a death sentence? It's such a shame because he's a great worker and was one of the most devoted believers in the all-seeing eye before the night of slaughter. Death sentence? How evil do you think I am? While I'd rather people didn't go around kicking my children, a mortal kicking a spirit tree isn't going to harm it. You said he was lashing out because his son died, right? I actually called you and your wife here to discuss the situation in Darklight City. Ashlock explained, and Julian sighed with relief. What situation are you referring to? Catherine asked. Ashlock paused as he thought of how to word it. I suppose I want to know why everyone looks so miserable? The two exchanged a confused look. Because millions died? Julian eventually said. Millions died? Are you perhaps referring to the battle with Vincent Nitros? Ashlock asked, and they nodded. Since I already brought him up, let's use Eric as an example. Head of sales for the Ashfallen Trading Company and devotee believer in the all-seeing eye. He was having the time of his life until the night of slaughter, where he desperately chased his 10-year-old son through the mud and rain, only to watch him be butchered by armored monsters in your service. Julian said, that is quite the sad story, Ashlock said as he fell into thought. How long do you think it will take him to get over it? Get over it? Julian blinked. Catherine stepped forward. Ashlock, a parent never gets over the death of a child. Time does heal all wounds, but just because the bleeding stops, a deep scar still remains. Divine energy gently crackled between Ashlock's branches as he processed their words. I understand that. But don't mortals die all the time? Beast tides wipe out entire cities of mortals who couldn't escape in time. How do they get over it? Again, with time, Catherine calmly explained. While the older generation continues to grieve those they left behind, the new generation is only told stories. The impact on them isn't the same until they inevitably experience what they heard in those stories, and so the cycle continues. Ashlock wasn't sure where the idea had come from, but he had assumed the people of this world would be far more desensitized to death. It was almost shocking to learn that they were just like the people back in his old world. If so, how did people put up with life here? He couldn't imagine being born as a mortal while knowing others could cultivate and live forever. How could he stay sane while toiling away on some farm for his overlords before dying after a few decades? He had already made efforts to reduce that feeling by selling cheap pills that granted mortals the chance to cultivate. But I can do so much more for them, Ashlock mused. Whether I accept it or not, I'm their god. They look up to and depend on me. I thought telling them why it happened would have been enough for them to all get over it, but now I see that wasn't enough. I have so much going on. Ashlock said to Jasmine's parents through Anubis, I defeated Vincent Nitros and took over the Blood Lotus sect. As we speak, I'm fighting off the cataclysmic beast tide, and just a moment ago, I had a run-in with a monarch realm cultivator from the Celestial Empire on our borders. Julian bowed his head. We understand. The citizens' plights and grief pales compared to what you do for us. No, I can do better, Ashlock said, earning a surprised look from Julius and Catherine. While I don't have the time or focus to help the mortals with day-to-day issues, I handled the aftermath of the fight with Vincent poorly. Even from a cynical perspective, it would have been a good opportunity to farm some goodwill from the people. It's an opportunity and duty I overlooked as I didn't see the mortals as worth my focus compared to the other things demanding my attention. However, I have some spare time right now and want to make things right. Do either of you have any suggestions? If you spot this narrative on Amazon, know that it has been stolen. Report the violation. Catherine and Julian looked at each other and fell into thought. The mortals were more essential to Ashlock's power than they likely realized. The people gave him wealth through taxes, nutrients through their waste, and, most importantly, divine energy. He had already noticed a significant drop in divine energy since the fight with Vincent Nitros. During the time his sect was in the mystic realm, the sacrificial credits he had saved up hardly grew from the divine stock market. He had assumed it was due to the sharp decrease in population but now suspected that the people's somber moods were also a contributing factor. I'd say the biggest issue right now is a lack of communication and closure, Julian concluded after a while. Go on. While you did tell the population a vague reason for the slaughter, many still have questions. While they know it was done because of Vincent Nitros, they don't understand why their loved ones had to be killed. So, another announcement with more detail would be appreciated, though I'm not sure what can be done for closure. What about a funeral to honor the dead? Catherine suggested. Due to the storm, everyone's been mostly trapped in their homes and unable to share their grief. Coming together as a community could help speed up the healing process. A large funeral could work. Julian agreed with his wife. Would such a thing be possible, Ashlock? Yes, but I have an idea. They both looked at him expectantly. You said the people will never move on, right? I think I have found a solution to help heal people's consciousness. What if instead of nameless gravestones, I have each person plant one of my seeds? That way, instead of a gravestone, they have a living tree they can visit and talk to. If it was done in the name of the all-seeing eye, it would also give him a constant inflow of divine energy. Catherine's eyes widened. That could work. I like that idea, though. She fell into contemplation and seemed to struggle with wording her next sentence. They're just identical seeds, right? The trees wouldn't be different from one another. While I like the idea, a gravestone is oddly more personalized. Do you see what I mean? That's a good point. Just putting a sign with the person's name doesn't feel sincere enough. And I can't merge the dead people's souls with the trees, as they were thoroughly destroyed by Vincent and would have disappeared by now anyway. Does it have to be their souls? Julian pointed out, we're just doing this for closure. So long as the people think there is a part of their loved one in the tree, it should be enough. After all, just like a gravestone, it's done for as a sentimental thing. Good point. So long as they believe it's real, that's good enough. Wait, isn't this a perfect job for Elysia Mistshroud? Her mystic chi can make anything she believes real into reality. Ashlock was shocked at how good of an idea this had become. He had always thought that one of the best aspects of this world was the possibility of eternal life. A gift he and his close allies enjoyed, but he wanted to share it with more people. Who wouldn't want to be worshippers of the all-seeing eye if, when they died, they got to become a spirit tree? I will leave it to you two to spread the word. In 2 days, a ceremony will be held to honor the dead. Inform the people that they should bring along an item that belonged to the person who died so that the demonic tree seed can be blessed with a fragment of the dead by a member of the Mistshroud family. I'm unsure as to their capabilities, but if Elysia is crazy enough, maybe she really can bring back their souls. We will inform the people, Catherine nodded. However, I need to tell them where this will be. How about along the road between Darklight and Ashfallen City? That way, it's equal distance from both cities and accessible enough for most of the population. Ashlock suggested, that area's mostly a wasteland, so it should be big enough to accommodate all the trees. I think this is a great idea. Julian paused before bowing deeply. Seriously, thank you, Ashlock. Darklight City hasn't felt the same since the night of slaughter, and it's been harrowing to see those around me break down. Catherine patted her husband's back with a sad look. While we thankfully didn't lose any family, we lost good friends during that night. This will be a chance for all of us to heal. No, it's I who should be grateful. It's the belief the mortals place in me which gives me power. Without them, I would be greatly weakened and unable to protect them from threats like the beast tide. This is a give-and-take relationship, and as their god, I have been letting them down. Ashlock paused. I'll try to do better from here on out. Can you two let me know if something like this happens again? We would be happy to, Julian smiled. Good. If that's all, Anubis can help you guys back down. I had one thing to ask, Catherine said while sheepishly raising her hand. Sure, go ahead. When can I next see little Jazz? It feels like so long since she came to visit me, Catherine said with sadness in her eyes. Ashlock chuckled. She has been rather busy around here lately, hasn't she? Well, you see that fog over there? She's currently training inside a pocket realm and should be out in 2 days' time. After spreading the word of the funeral, you're free to come back here and wait for her if you wish. I'd love that, thank you. I'm sure she will be thrilled to see you too. Ashlock half joked. Jasmine found her mother a little irritating, but what child didn't find their parents at least a little annoying? If that is all, Anubis, show them out. As you wish, Creator. Anubis placed his hands on the shoulders of the two mortals, and the trio sunk into the shadows. Once again, with the mountain peak silent, Ashlock decided to go and check on the front lines with the beast tide. The world blurred, and he arrived over the vast northern forest. As he feared, due to his antics near Argentum, the storm had advanced, shrinking the gap between the storm and his forest, giving him less land to kill the monsters before they reached his offspring. Thousands of Soulfire Realm and a few Star Core Realm Ents that had been created from the monsters' corpses roamed the land, with a few still in the sky. Willow, his spatial position, floated overhead and continued to do what he had been instructed. Whenever one of his Ents managed to restrain a monster in the desolation field for long enough, Willow would teleport the body to his surface, where chaos would promptly execute the monster. Willow ate a few to advance his cultivation, which had advanced to the 5th stage of the Star Core realm. The rest were stored. Once enough corpses had piled up, Ashlock would overtake Willow with Progeny Dominion, and turn them all into Ents. So far, this has been working quite well, but there were still issues. The storm's advance had only been slowed, not stopped, meaning it would reach his offspring and eventually Red Vine Peak. There was also the issue that his thousands of Soul Fire Realm Ents would be small fry to the wave of Star Core Realm monsters soon to come. I need to hurry up and get those Spirit Stones from the Silverspire family so I can empower my offspring with my new cultivation technique, Divine Cycle of Creation and Ruin, SS, before the second wave arrives. The ones at the very front had already had their cultivation boosted up from the Spirit Stones Stella had purchased from the Eternal Pursuit Pavilion and were nearing the Star Core realm. But that will be in a few days. For now, there's something I wanted to check. He had spread his roots under the beast tide, but the storm blocked his spiritual sight from penetrating too deep. The storm also interfered with his attacks, so he couldn't efficiently wipe out the waves of monsters before they reached his Ents. However, he wasn't totally blind or helpless within the storm, he was just weakened. Let's see what's lurking in the darkness. Ashlock's sight moved to within the storm, and in the chaos of wind and rain, he saw the monsters gathering at the edge in large groups. Luckily, they were still weaklings, mainly in the Soulfire realm. If only this storm wasn't here, I'd be able to melt them with my Desolation Chi. Ashlock paused as an idea struck him. He had been so focused on the storm, but what if he solely targeted the monsters? If I released Desolation Chi infused with Demonic Tao, wouldn't that make it more efficient? But I don't know Demonic Tao despite being a demonic tree. You actually do, just at a low level. Wait, I do? Ashlock asked the system prompt that had suddenly appeared in his mind. What other ones do I know? Known Taos in order of your current level of comprehension: Spatial, Shadow, Desolation, Soul, Harmony, Lightning, Fire, Water, Earth, Wind, Metal, Illusion, Poison, Blood, Sunlight, Demonic. There was a lot to unpack here. Spatial made sense, being the highest as it was the affinity he had until he upgraded to Desolation. Next was Shadow, which was high because he had learned it to a high level through his connection to Nox, who had inherited the Dark Throne and learned Shadow Law. Soul Tao was also high up as he had reshaped his soul into one fitting a tree. Basic elements like fire, water, earth, wind, and metal also made sense as he learned them to form his inner world. Is this all of them? Ashlock wondered. No, there are too many to count below Demonic Tao. These are simply the ones you have enough understanding of to use with Desolation Chi. I see. Why'd I know Lightning and Poison Tao? You have resistance skills for those affinities, which came with some level of Tao understanding. That's also why fire is higher up than the other basic Taos. What about sunlight? You're a tree. What tree wouldn't have sunlight Tao? Good point. Ashlock chuckled. Either way, this meant he had demonic Tao but at a very low level of comprehension. The only way to improve it was to meditate on the heaven's whispers and use it. Ashlock didn't want to sit around meditating. So he chose option 2, infusing his Desolation Chi with his weak demonic Tao and slowly advancing the front line into the storm. The monsters gathering at the edge seemed to notice the presence of the Desolation Chi immediately, as the weaker ones began to back up, much to the rage of the monsters behind them. While this may not be able to outright kill them as the storm is suppressing me, maybe I can use this to shepherd them in a certain direction? Ashlock had planned to do this with his forests once the storm inevitably reached them. But why not start early? And he had just the hungry spider to feed them to. Chapter 430, Yummy Bugs. Jasmine was surrounded by death. That was a rather dramatic way to put it, but it wasn't wrong. Around her were withered corpses of bugs the size of her head who thought she was free food and curious plants that had tried to dissolve her while she was cultivating. Ow, ow, ow. Jasmine hissed through her teeth as she plucked a needle from her arm. It left behind a red mark, one of 100 that dotted her body. She also had acid burns from the plants around her neck where the buggers had tried to strangle her. Yet despite all that, she had managed to cultivate in relative peace. Because of the poison body constitution she had acquired from the previous pocket realm, poison ran through her spirit roots and throughout her body. She could choose whatever poison she wanted to harbor within her body, and she had gone with a fast-acting, paralyzing poison. So, the monsters or plants found themselves paralyzed when they tried to eat her. It also helps that my poison body constitution makes me far more resistant to poisons. Which seems to be the main hunting method of the monsters and carnivorous flora here, Jasmine muttered as she inspected the needle, which was as long as her pinky finger and dripping with a yellow sap-like substance. She stored the needle in her spatial ring, as it seemed like a useful alchemical ingredient she could show Stella later. Standing up, she raised her arms overhead and stretched her back. Her stomach growled with hunger in response, and she frowned as she rubbed it. I stop having to eat at the Star Core realm. Right? Sigh, that sounds nice. It's hard to stay focused when I have to take breaks to eat every few days. She couldn't help but grin, though, as this pocket realm was possibly the most productive one yet. She had gone from the second stage of the Soul Fire realm to the seventh. At this rate, the Star Core realm felt like a stone's throw away. It helps that the chi in this pocket realm is weirdly high, considering the level of danger I've faced, Jasmine mused as she looked around. She was in a clearing surrounded by towering trees and lush foliage. Nature chi and a few other chi types were thick in the air, creating a near-perfect cultivation environment. I might have even managed to reach the 9th stage if I didn't have bugs and plants constantly trying to eat me. Maybe I should ask Stella or Ashlock if I can have an ent to guard me next time. I felt a lot safer with Saul at my side, but I understand he's needed on the front lines against the beast tide right now. Jasmine knew Stella took Maple everywhere with her, and while that rotund squirrel was unhelpful and sleeping most of the time if something were to attack Stella, she was sure he would pulverize any threat for her. Peace of mind is a luxury to cultivators. It's hard to fully focus on the heaven whispers when I'm at risk of being eaten alive, Jasmine grumbled as she began setting up a small campfire. It would be burnt to a crisp bug meat for dinner again. She tried to ignite the logs using a flint and steel from her spatial ring. The constant clack of her attempts echoed through the bustling forest. Come on, she grew frustrated after 10 attempts to get a good enough spark. Where's a fire cultivator when you need one? Whoa. The sparks finally landed and her kindling ignited. She crouched down and gently blew on the flame to help them grow. Yes, little flame, grow big and strong for me. Poking it with a stick, the larger logs caught the flame. Jasmine smiled with satisfaction as she enjoyed the warmth radiating from the flame and the smell of burning wood. With the fire going, she retrieved the bug that had rudely interrupted her cultivating a few minutes earlier. It was quite round, with 2 big bug eyes twitching from the paralyzing poison and a brown furry body. The meat from it tasted quite bad as its fur burned and melted to the skin, but she didn't have the energy to try stripping it properly. Bug meat was bug meat, no matter how you cooked it. She hummed a happy tune as she grabbed one of its jointed legs and dragged it across the forest floor to the campfire. Despite her cultivator strength, it was still quite a lot of effort. The bug was so heavy she found it a miracle the thing could fly. I should use my nature chi to control the foliage to carry this bug for me, Jasmine mused, eyeing the grass she was dragging across, but that would hinder my progress. She sighed. It was quite the conundrum every cultivator faced. She needed to practice using techniques to get better at them, but that consumed her chi and delayed her advancement toward the Star Core realm. But when I reach the Star Core realm, my soul will start to passively replenish my spent chi. Maybe it's fine if I hold out until then to practice? Jasmine calmly picked up a sharp rock while pondering. There was a wet squelch as she brought the rock down on the bug with 2 hands, impaling it between the eyes. It stopped twitching and fell limp. The first time she did this, she freaked out throughout the process. But after a month in this pocket realm, she'd killed and eaten a dozen bugs by now. This was simply a routine. She didn't even have to eat the bugs as she had come prepared with rations in her spatial ring, but there was a reason she did anyway despite the awful taste. Tilting the monster's corpse, that yellow liquid that coated its needle dripped into a bowl she positioned under. Blood also spilled out, mixing with the acidic-smelling yellow poison, creating a brown soup. This was the one part Jasmine still hadn't gotten used to. Pinching her nose with one hand, she raised the bowl to her lips and, After a brief pause to question her sanity, she tipped it and drank deeply. Blah, she almost hurled but barely managed to keep it down. Gulping down the rest while asking for air, she threw the bowl to the side and ran around in circles while spitting out the god-awful taste. She collapsed to her knees and stayed in that position for a while as saliva dripped from her lips. It was revolting, but the results spoke for themselves. Her body absorbed the poison and some nature chi along with it. It wasn't much, only around the amount she would get from a few hours of cultivating. But if she had to pick between sitting for hours or drinking a vile concoction of bug poison and blood, she would probably still pick cultivating. But that was beside the point. This was a more efficient method of absorbing chi, no matter how much she hated it. Having a poison body constitution and taste buds is a crime, Jasmine said as she wiped her mouth and stood up on shaky legs. While it was a harrowing experience, she was desperate for power. Her master had grand ambitions for her, and she refused to let her down. She tilted her head and looked at the bug carcass that had notably deflated. The poison dissipated from the meat when cooked, so she had to drain it first. But some chi remained in the bug's meat, so if she wanted to get the most out of the bug, she had to eat it. Time for dinner, she said, her face turning white as a sheet. You know what? Being a cultivator really isn't as glamorous as everyone makes it out to be. I almost got poisoned to death in the last pocket realm, and now I'm eating bugs for dinner, Jasmine ranted while summoning a sharp knife. She hacked off the bug's legs before gutting the thing. With all the nasty innards removed, she stowed the legs and innards away in a spatial ring as leaving them to the open air would attract monsters, a mistake she had learned in the first week here. The whole process was disgusting. Everything about surviving in this pocket realm had been a battle. Yet, she wouldn't want it any other way. She could feel herself growing, both in cultivation, maturity, and fortifying her will. Maybe she had picked up some of Stella's insane view of the world. But she felt like the more she suffered now, the better her foundations would be for what was to come. I love bugs. Bugs are the best. Yummy, yummy, in my tummy, Jasmine sang to herself as she cut some strips of meat from the carcass, and tears ran down her face from the stench. Holding the meat as far away from her nose as possible, she draped the cuts over a horizontal stick she had set above the fire. While cooking the meat to a crisp, she sat as far away as possible and brought out a technique manual. Okay, it's time to study. The heavens whispers teach me a lot, and my cultivation is progressing nicely, but without ideas of how to channel nature chi into techniques, I will be far too dependent on the whip Ashlock gifted me for attacking. Flipping through the pages, she found a hopefully low-cost and useful technique she could practice. Whispers of the Forest, a technique suitable for nature affinity cultivators of all stages. This sounds perfect. Now let's see. A few hours passed as Jasmine found herself engrossed in the book. The technique detailed the ability to glean information from the surrounding flora. Of course, non-sentient flora couldn't exactly talk like Ashlock or the other spirit trees could. Grass didn't know the difference between up and down or what the color red was. However, plants did react to the surroundings. The changing of light, for example, and if the shadow of a monster blocked the light, even the grass would respond. Stolen content alert. This content belongs on Royal Road. Report any occurrences. Fierce growls from Jasmine's stomach finally forced her back to reality. Ouch, she kneeled over as she gripped her stomach. It felt like it was going to devour her from within. Okay, I'll feed you. She glanced up at the campfire, and her face fell. The meat was gone. The campfire had long gone out, yet the charred meat on a stick Jasmine had been anticipating was missing as if it had never been there to begin with. Her eyes darted around as she cautiously stood up. Meat didn't simply float away. Something had taken it, which was strange, as the bugs hadn't shown an interest in their cooked brethren before, and the plants were afraid of fire. Something new was out there, and it had stolen her dinner. Jasmine's heart pounded as she dropped to one knee, her fingers fanning out before pressing into the cool, damp soil. Looking around one last time, she calmed her breathing and closed her eyes. This was a good chance to use Whispers of the Forest. Thankfully, compared to other techniques she had looked at before, it had been quite easy to understand. The first step of the technique was to breathe. The earthy scent of the forest filled her lungs. Next, she closed her eyes and let her chi flow downwards into the earth, spreading through the roots and blades of grass like a gentle breeze stirring a sleeping meadow. The grass seemed to quiver ever so slightly as if caught in an unseen wind. The pulse of her chi continued to expand outwards, like a droplet disturbing a still pond. She could feel the buzz of life from each plant as her chi weaved into the living network of the forest. What seemed like a quiet clearing had turned into an overwhelming symphony. It was as if the forest was calling out, begging for her attention. Only the trees remained silent, their wistful presence brushing curiously against her mind. She listened. The forest spoke in murmurs, sharing fragments of movement, the disturbances in the natural rhythm of the land. A monster's cautious steps, the scurry of frightened creatures, the lingering presence of something that did not belong. Her chi reached the clearing's edge, brushing against an invisible disturbance, a shift in the chi of the land. Something had passed here, and recently, the air was tainted with hints of demonic chi. A monster. Jasmine drew back her chi with clumsy difficulty. Her eyes snapped open. South. Whatever monster it was, she believed it had gone that way. She rose swiftly, wiping the wet dirt from her fingers. Despite the tense situation, she couldn't help but smile. She had used a technique, and it had actually been helpful. Her happiness was quickly dampened by the growls of her stomach. Reluctantly, she took some rations out of her spatial ring and ate them while her gaze lingered on the south. Should I chase after it? She wondered as she was feeling giddy and full of excitement. Not only had she used a technique, but her cultivation had soared. She was feeling on top of the world. It didn't attack me while I was reading. It only went for the meat. Therefore, it can't be that strong. Right? Summoning her whip made out of one of Ashlock's vines, she gripped its mithril handle. There were small holes in the handle that distributed her paralyzing poison to the weapon, causing the thorns along the length of the whip to glisten with a faint sheen. Should they so much as graze someone, they would be inflicted with her poison. Her perfect nature soul flames cascaded down the whip's length, igniting it in a sickly green glow due to her poisonous body. The vine shuddered as if awakening, drinking in her chi with greedy hunger. Jasmine felt the shift immediately. The connection between her and the weapon deepened as if the whip had become an extension of her own body. Seamlessly attuned to her every thought and movement, she flexed her wrist, and the whip snapped forward like a lunging serpent, cutting through the air with a sharp crack. At her mental command, it recoiled in an instant, curling back at her feet. Jasmine grinned as she inspected the handle. The power, the responsiveness, it was staggering compared to a few weeks ago. It was like night and day. I didn't realize there was such a substantial difference between a few stages in the soul fire realm. This realization made her hunger to reach the star core realm that much greater. But first, she had a thief to hunt. Days passed quicker than Jasmine would have liked. But she was getting closer. At this point, she had sunk so much time into the hunt that she couldn't quit. However, it hadn't been a useless endeavor. She could now use the whispers of the forest technique while walking. She sent out chi pulses to her surroundings with every step, and the forest answered. Her target was near. Crouching as quietly as she could, she peered through a bush at a clearing. An ancient cliff face of jagged rock weathered from the passing of time cradled a sparkling pool of crystal-clear water. According to the forest, the thief should be at the water's edge. Jasmine's eyes widened with glee, only for them to narrow. The thief was nothing like what she had expected. It stood on 4 long, spindly legs, each tipped with barbed claws that dug into the dirt as it moved. Its chitinous exoskeleton mirrored the surrounding colors, making it almost invisible to the naked eye, and its 2 forearms were like deathly scythes. It was a mantis with some kind of camouflage capabilities. The mantis was also a child, only being around a meter tall. Jasmine also noticed as she looked closer that the mantis was moving sluggishly, and along the exposed underside of its arms, a few needles dripping with blood were sticking out. It fell victim to the bugs? Jasmine whispered, and the mantis's eye twitched in her direction as it paused beside the water. It could hear me from that far away? It's super on guard. While Jasmine couldn't infer its strength with 100% accuracy, it didn't have the overwhelming presence star core cultivators like Grand Elder Redclaw had, so it should be somewhere in the soul fire realm. The mantis watched her bush for a while longer before bending down to drink. Jasmine let it, as she wanted a real fight. However, a sudden buzzing sound overhead signaled the arrival of newcomers. It was a sound she knew all too well. A sound that might even haunt her dreams once she left this place. It was the ear-grating buzz of insects, and by the intensity, it was a swarm of them. Jasmine concealed herself deeper into the bush, eager not to attract their attention. While she could easily beat one of them, she wasn't sure how she would fare against a swarm. The mantis backed up from the water, and she could see fear in its eyes as it looked at the skyline. Surrounded on all sides by the cradling cliff face, the mantis had no choice but to retreat toward it. Jasmine watched with slight annoyance as the swarm of around 10 bugs descended upon the mantis. She had spent days hunting this thief down, only for the grand showdown she had been excited for to be stolen from her by those bugs of all things. The baby mantis let out a not-so-terrifying shriek as it desperately waved its hind legs at the approaching swarm. All it got in response was one of the bugs diving down and thrusting a poisoned needle into its arm. The mantis uttered another cry as it retreated further, eventually finding a crevice in the cliff face that mostly hid its body. Curling up, it tried to defend against the onslaught with its chitinous exoskeleton. However, it was useless. Its death was inevitable, a slow and sad death. Jasmine started to feel bad for the mantis, and her hatred for the bugs was at an all-time high. Bringing out the mystic realm warp fruit just in case, she pocketed it and stepped out of the bush with her hand tightly gripping the handle of her whip. The stupid bugs were so enthralled with their helpless prey that they didn't react until Jasmine's whip cracked through the air, striking one of them with such force that the bug exploded in a shower of blood and guts. Oh no, Jasmine grimaced as the attention of the bugs turned to her. What followed was an intense battle. The bugs turned out to be quite adept at fighting in groups, and they soon learned her effective attack range. As she went to try and strike one, another would come from a blind spot. This wouldn't be a hard fight if my spiritual sight was better. Jasmine gritted her teeth as she pulled out a freshly planted needle from her neck of all places. While she was immune to their poison, if the needle had stuck in airway, she would die. Hours passed, and the darkness of night had long blanketed the land. She collapsed to one knee while breathing heavily. Finally, she could rest as the final bug had been defeated after fighting throughout the night. Many needles were still sticking out her back, and trails of blood ran down her body and dyed her clothes. She looked and felt miserable, without the strength left to so much as stand on her own 2 feet. "It's finally over," she murmured, about to close her eyes when a strange clicking noise made her blood freeze. Looking up, the baby mantis was before her. "I didn't even notice its approach. That camouflage is really something. Have you come to kill me?" Jasmine asked with a wheeze. The mantis curiously looked at her while staying at a respectful distance. "No?" Jasmine tilted her head, and the monster mirrored her actions. A chuckle escaped her lips. "You are like an obedient puppy." A while passed as Jasmine caught her breath. The mantis neither left nor made a move, it just silently guarded her, its chitinous exoskeleton dyeing a shade of black to mirror the darkening surroundings. Jasmine eventually felt better and managed to stand. It was difficult, but she slowly pulled out the needles from her back one by one. The mantis seemed envious. "Does it want my help?" Jasmine mused. She had never heard of a monster being submissive like this before, except before Stella. She had a way to make monsters submit to her. "Hungry?" Jasmine brought out some rations from her spatial ring and dangled it before the monster. It cautiously took the offered meat in its mouth and munched on it. While distracted, Jasmine pulled out one of the needles stuck in its arm. The mantis flinched but otherwise didn't react. "Good boy," Jasmine said as she pulled out the rest one by one while giving it more food. The mantis grew less cautious, and Jasmine became less wary of it. As the sun crested the horizon, Jasmine felt a faint tug on her soul. The mystic realm had come to an end. "This is goodbye, little mantis," Jasmine patted it on the head. It was still poisoned and injured, but there was a chance it would survive now. "I have to return home." It let out a soft cry and tried to get closer. "I'm sorry I can't bring you back with me." Her words trailed off as she reached into her pocket and brought out the mystic realm warp fruit. If she fed this to the monster, would there be a chance it could return with her? "I do want to have a monster or ent to help guard me in future pocket realms. While this mantis is quite weak right now, with its camouflage capability, it could make a good guard." Jasmine made her decision. She wanted to bring the mantis home. Passing it the mystic realm warp fruit, she slowly explained, "Eat this once I've gone. If you eat it now, A godly tree will likely eat you before I can explain. Understand? She didn't have time to get an answer before being pulled back to Red Vine Peak. Dashing out of the fog, she ignored the others and desperately looked around. Would the mantis understand and make it back? Chapter 431, A Worried Mother. While Jasmine looked around with confusion, she was surprised to suddenly be embraced from behind. Still jumpy from her month of survival in the pocket realm, she jerked her head to look behind. Are you not happy to see your mother? The woman who had captured her smiled. After releasing a shaky breath, Jasmine relaxed. Mother, you scared me. She twisted her body to return the hug. What are you doing here? Am I not allowed to visit my adorable little girl whenever I want? Her mother asked softly, running her fingers through her grass-like hair. Jasmine burrowed her head into her mother's embrace in response, earning a light chuckle. Her mother gently picked up a few strands of her hair and sniffed them. Jas dear, these white flowers in your hair have the lovely scent of jasmine. Please don't think of making perfume from me. Mother, Jasmine said seriously. Her mother hummed with amusement as she continued playing with her hair. Summer will be rough for you, Jas. Insects will flock to you thinking you smell nice. Jasmine's eyes widened, and she looked up at her mother, the mantis. What mantis? Her mother asked with confusion before glancing around. Jasmine wiggled out of her mother's loving embrace and dashed to the bench below Ashlock. She craned her neck to look up at the towering tree. Wispy gold divine energy danced across Ashlock's bark, and a slightly unsettling feeling radiated from him. Her mouth opened and closed as she tried and failed to formulate her question. How should she go about asking about the mantis? Just as she decided on her approach, a presence made itself known. Rising from the shadow of the bench was the lich Jasmine had seen coming and going from Stella's shadow before. You're out early, Jasmine, Anubis said, but his voice was different from usual. It sounded pretty similar to how many had described Ashlock's overlapping voices but was far less mind-destroying to listen to. The lich turned his head to gaze upon the distant horizon that was obscured by the intense storm. There are still a few minutes until sunrise. Yeah, I didn't fight the pull on my soul because I wanted to see if my new mantis friend would make it. Mantis friend? The lich looked back at her, its black flame eyes flickering with interest. Jasmine gathered herself and explained, in the last few hours of the mystic realm, I saved a mantis I had been tracking from a swarm of bugs. It was dying from poison, so I helped remove the needles from its body and fed it some of my rations. I had planned to kill the monster for stealing my meat a few days prior but changed my mind. How could you do something so dangerous? Her mother locked her hands on her shoulders and reprimanded her. I had thought the blood on your cloak was from enemies, but now that I look closer, are those wounds on your neck? Jasmine shivered as she felt her mother poke the bumps left by the poison needles. Mother, be careful, those wounds are from the insects that attacked me in the pocket realm. There might still be some poison. Poison? And why are there so many wounds? They are everywhere. Jasmine looked blankly at her mother. I have as much poison as the blood running through my body. It's not dangerous for me. She swallowed her words as she saw her mother looking as if she was about to faint from worry. Sorry, I won't do it again. Her mother looked at her with tears rolling down her face. She wasn't really sorry. She was just sorry that she had been caught and let her mother see what she had to endure in the pocket realm. I should really have learned a healing technique, Jasmine cursed to herself. From looking through the technique book and what Elaine taught her, she knew that nature affinity was quite versatile. It was one of the most powerful forces of destruction while also encompassing other aspects that focused on nurturing, such as healing. It was a bit of an all-rounder affinity, capable of almost anything yet specializing in nothing. Don't worry, Catherine, I'll get a healer for her, Ashlock said through the lich. Desolation chi arched off his trunk and struck at the air beside them. A feeling of dread chilled Jasmine's soul, causing her to unintentionally step back. Unlike the stable, shimmering gates formed through spatial chi that she had grown used to, this rift was a festering wound in the fabric of existence. The air groaned as the space where the desolation chi touched blackened and cracked as if eaten away by an unseen force. Reality continued to wither away, and the cracks widened until a jagged tear a few times wider and taller than a person formed. Jasmine tried to look away, but she couldn't. The chilling tear demanded her absolute attention. Her eyes narrowed as a light could be seen from within the abyss. It glowed in intensity as it approached until it became all-encompassing and hard to look at directly. A ball of blinding light cradled by 8 arms emerged, followed by a vaguely humanoid body of gray wood that loomed over all except the lich. It was one of Ashlock's creations that she knew all too well. Saul kneeled before her, and one of its many arms extended downward, a wisp of healing light held between its wooden fingers. Jasmine stood on her tiptoes and accepted the healing light. A refreshing feeling washed through her body from her forehead down to her toes. Reaching up, she confirmed by touching her neck that the many marks were gone. Oh, thank the heavens, her mother embraced her in another hug. Jasmine smiled and patted her on the back. See, Mom, I'm fine. I'll have Saul remain here on Red Vine Peak in case other sect members need healing. Ashlock said through the lich. The desolation rift closed slowly behind Saul, and Jasmine couldn't help but look at where it had been with some suspicion. It looked like reality had returned to normal, but the image of it cracked and blackened still weighed heavily on her. Unauthorized tale usage. If you spot this story on Amazon, report the violation. Now, tell me about this mantis. Yes, dear, her mother pulled back and studied her face. What did you say about befriending a monster? Well, Jasmine gulped as her mother stared at her. As I said, I tracked it down because it stole the meat I was cooking for dinner one night. However, after I saved it from a swarm of bugs, it took a liking to me. So you saved a monster and tried to be its friend. I didn't try, we did become friends. And the word, monster, makes it sound big and scary. It was just a baby mantis mother, totally helpless. A monster is a monster. Her mother frowned. I feel like your master is to blame for this line of thinking. Maybe. Jasmine looked to the side guiltily. But I think it could be trained. Who's to say it won't eat you at the first opportunity? Even cultivators and humans betray one another all the time, but a monster? It's a guarantee. There's a reason people don't keep them as pets, dear. Their souls and very nature are corrupted by their demonic chi. I know, Jasmine grumbled, but mother, I need a guard during the Mystic Realm trips. It had good camouflage and seemed obedient enough. What's this about a monster? Master. Jasmine beamed as she saw Stella emerging from the mythical fog with her arms behind her head. Sup, Jasmine. Stella seemed quite relaxed, and through their mental link, Jasmine confirmed it wasn't just an act. She seemed at peace about something. So, what's this about a monster? Despite her mother's disapproving stare, Jasmine explained the situation to Stella and retold her Mystic Realm experience. As expected of my disciple, you're growing stronger so quickly. Stella ruffled her hair. I was worried you wouldn't learn what it took to become a real cultivator because I spoiled you with resources, but even I wouldn't drink bug poison soup. Jasmine winced at being reminded of that awful taste. As for this baby mantis you befriended, it sounds kinda weak. But we were all weak at some point. I also agree that having a guardian in the Mystic Realm is a good idea, but I wanted to refrain from giving you one this time as we were given Mystic Realm warp fruits. So it should have been safer. Also, none of the great advancements and experiences you gained this time around would have been possible if you had a powerful ent watching over you. Stella tapped her chin. But if you train this monster up, I suppose I can consider it part of your personal strength? I agree with you, Master. Jasmine wanted to jump up and hug her master but refrained. It was as if she was saying everything she wanted, much to her mother's obvious disapproval. I don't want a powerful ent guarding me either. But a silent sentry that can watch over me while I cultivate and keep pests off me would be helpful. Stella ruffled her hair. I think so, too. I see great potential in this monster friend of yours. But where is it? That's the problem, Jasmine said, looking around. It hasn't appeared yet. How were you planning on bringing this mantis back here? Ashlock asked through Anubis. I gave it my Mystic Realm warp fruit and told it to eat. But I don't know if it was intelligent enough to understand what I said. Ah, that won't work. The Mystic Realm warp fruit only works if eaten by someone whose soul is anchored to the Mystic Realm. It's why you are forcefully brought back here when the Mystic Realm ends. Ashlock explained, even if the mantis eats the Mystic Realm warp fruit, it won't do anything. Jasmine felt like an arrow had struck her heart. Ah, don't worry, though, I can bring that mantis back through a portal. Her eyes lit up. Really? Yeah, I can access all pocket realms, and it should be easy to find the mantis since I can track the chi signature of my fruit. Just give me a moment. Jasmine felt Ashlock's presence focus elsewhere, and the lich fell silent. So, you're in the 7th stage of the Soulfire realm now? Stella said, sounding impressed. Yep, Jasmine nodded enthusiastically. Your presence has also increased, Master. Did you reach the nascent soul realm? Stella smiled. No, I only went up 2 stages in the Star Core realm to the 9th stage. I still have a long way to go before I can try and ascend to the nascent soul realm. Stella shrugged. I hoped to push to the nascent soul realm to prove Ashlock wrong, but realized I'm not ready for it, and that's okay. How very modest of you, Diana said as she appeared out of nowhere and put her arm around Stella's neck. Diana, don't tell me. Phew. Stella relaxed. I thought you reached the nascent soul realm for a moment. Hold on. How did you do that? Do what? Diana asked with an innocent smile. Stella narrowed her eyes. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You're going to have to elaborate. It's been quite a hectic month for me. How did you sneak up on me like that? Diana shrugged. You weren't paying attention? Oh, hey, Jasmine. How's it going? Whoa, that's a lot of blood on your cloak. Did you have a busy month of slaughter? Jasmine always found these two's friendship amusing. Yes, Grand Elder Diana, you could say that. That's good to hear. Diana unraveled herself from Stella. It was unmistakable. Even Jasmine could tell she seemed a lot different from before. Stop changing the subject. Stella spun around and glared at Diana. Something happened to you. I can feel it. What can I say? I took a little trip down to hell and was trained by a demon. Diana shrugged as if it were no big deal. Oh, and I reached the 9th stage like you, she winked. Isn't that fun? Stella withdrew her sword. If you don't tell me what fortune you encountered, I'll beat it out of you. Diana seemed amused. I wouldn't do that if I were you. What if you lose? Lose? Stella snorted. I seriously doubt that. You must have forgotten last time. Fine, let's have a little duel, and if you win, I'll tell you. Jasmine said, sorry to interrupt you, but you are both peak Star Core realm cultivators. If you were to fight now, it would destroy everything. True, Stella said, lowering her sword. Let's do this battle on our way to the Silverspire residence. Diana nodded and was about to say something when her breath was stolen by a monstrous presence that blazed like an inferno and suffocated the entire peak. Jasmine followed everyone's gazes toward the mystical fog. With measured steps that charred the ground beneath and a trailing aura of crimson flames, Grand Elder Redclaw strode out of the mystic realm with the other Redclaw elders following at a respectful step behind. I apologize, everyone, he said as he raised his hand, and the immense pressure he was emitting dissipated. I'm still getting used to controlling my second soul. Everyone was stunned and speechless, all except Stella. While everyone stared at the Grand Elder in awe, she alone walked over to him. Oh no, will she try to challenge him to a fight? Jasmine wondered. Grand Elder Redclaw stayed in place, keenly eyeing Stella's approach. She paused before him, and they exchanged glances for a moment. It took you long enough, old man, Stella smirked and raised her hand. But please let me congratulate you on your ascension. Jasmine couldn't help but let her mouth drop in bafflement. Was that really her master? Instead of being jealous and annoyed that someone had taken her spotlight, she was congratulating him. That's very kind of you. Grand Elder Redclaw smiled and shook her offered hand. Though I must admit this congratulation feels somewhat bittersweet. You don't seem so far from this level yourself, and as you so kindly put it, I'm an old man. Stella shook her head. What does age have to do with it? You have an infant soul now. Once you are old and withered, you can swap to your new soul. Jasmine could tell through their master-disciple link that Stella was being genuine. That's quite true, Grand Elder Redclaw chuckled as he stroked his chin. I was stuck in the Star Core realm for what felt like an eternity, but since joining the Ashfallen sect, my ascension has been a breeze. I feel truly blessed to be a part of this big family and look forward to all of our continued success. He bowed deeply, and everyone watching clapped. Jasmine smiled. The man's words warmed her heart. However, the celebration for his ascension ended abruptly as another presence at the level of the nascent soul realm radiated out of the mystic realm. Oh, the Grand Elder raised a brow. I didn't expect there to be another one that had reached the nascent soul realm this time. Jasmine was also deeply curious. Just who could it be? Chapter 432, Another Nascent Soul Realm. Stella squinted at the mystical fog and felt a sinking feeling in her chest. She could accept the Redclaw Grand Elder reaching the nascent soul realm before her. He was a war hero who had been cultivating for as many, if not more, decades as the years she had been alive. The gap in their life experience and understanding was simply vast, and she respected the man a lot. But someone or something else had reached the nascent soul realm. Is it perhaps Kada? Stella silently hoped. She had long accepted that Ashlock's pets advanced in cultivation at an unfathomable speed and had stopped competing. But other cultivators? If she had fallen behind one of them, there was no excuse. Stella knew she was spoiled. She was born with an ancient bloodline that let her learn and progress at insane rates. She had access to unlimited cultivation resources, and most importantly, she had the loving support of her demonic tree dad. She hadn't earned any of this. The bloodline came with birth, and the resources came from her relationship with Tree. That's precisely why she cultivated so much and was so hard on herself, to not waste her life advantages and protect Ash. It's why she was so set on reaching the nascent soul realm. It was the realm Ash was in, and until she surpassed him, she would always be under his protection. Stella bit her lip as she stared at the mystical fog. Logically, she knew others reaching the nascent soul realm didn't mean Ash would stop relying on her completely. But her weakness was also a burden on him. Just as she wanted to protect him, he was overprotective of her. An example was that one of the sect's strongest members, Maple, was her guard most of the time. Stella appreciated it, but at the same time, it made her feel like a problem. She wanted to be not only stronger but the strongest. For her pride, not to be seen as a burden, and to protect the ones she loved. Get back. Something is not right. Grand Elder Redclaw's stern and commanding voice was followed by the nascent soul realm fire cultivator drawing his sword and putting himself between Stella and the mystical fog. Stella took a few steps back as instructed. Everyone else followed suit, but the order had been clearly directed at her. If I had reached the nascent soul realm, would he still tell me to get back? Stella clenched her fists. She wanted to be the one standing up and protecting everyone. She paused and let out a breath. I'm too stuck in my own head. Relax, you were at peace with your progress before leaving the mystic realm, remember? Comparison is the enemy of joy. Her eyes darted to Jasmine, who was staring right at her. I need to be better for Jasmine. To stop tormenting her through our master-disciple link. Simply forcing my cultivation ahead isn't the solution. I need a new mindset. Stella stepped through the ether and appeared beside Jasmine and Diana by the bench. Her star core hummed as she shrouded her disciple and Jasmine's mother in a protective aura. If whatever was coming out of that portal offensively unleashed their nascent soul realm soul pressure, it would crush Catherine into a bloody pulp and likely break many of Jasmine's bones. Nascent soul realm existences were not to be messed with. Stella's eyes darted among the people present. Some Redclaw teenagers in the Soulfire realm were huddled behind the Redclaw elders, and many mudcloaks were wandering around. I will first escape to Ash's inner world with Jasmine and Catherine as they take priority. I will then return for the Redclaws and, finally, the mudcloaks. Then, I will reassess the situation and look to save the weaker Star Core members of the sect. Stella's racing thoughts were silenced by laughter echoing from the mystical fog. Her eyes narrowed. I know this laugh. It's coming. Grand Elder Redclaw's voice was sharp with alarm. His scarlet robes billowed with crimson flames as he instinctively stepped back. Hold on, don't attack yet, Stella said. Why? The Grand Elder asked without taking his eyes off the fog. I feel. Stella paused as she tried to put her finger on it. A faint connection to whatever is coming, and that laugh is familiar. The Grand Elder didn't weaken his posture, but he hummed in agreement. While I don't feel this connection, I agree that the laugh does sound familiar. I will trust your words, Stella. Don't attack everyone, but be ready to fight or flee. The gathered cultivators of Redvine Peak in the Star Core realm stepped forward, their hands hovering over weapons, ready to strike at whatever entity was emerging from the shifting veil of the mystic realm's fog. Diana stepped up beside Stella. Her wings and claws were out. Stella couldn't help but take a moment to appraise her rival. While she looked similar to before, the presence she radiated was far more oppressive. Stella side-eyed Diana and raised a brow. The questions kept piling up, yet the demoness returned a smirk in response to her inquiring gaze. Maybe I really will lose to her in a duel? Stella mused, but that could wait until later. The mystical fog churned, swirling as if resisting the presence of whoever sought to step through. Then, a limb breached the barrier, a twisted arm of gnarled black wood that glowed with a faint violet hue. It reached outward with long, spindly fingers. Yet, it was unlike the towering ents that Ashlock had conjured in the past. There was something human about it. The delicate curvature of the arm, the way the fingers flexed with an almost instinctive grace. It bore an uncanny resemblance to a woman's arm rather than that of a lumbering, mindless servant weaved from the dead bodies of those Ash had defeated. There's no way. Stella was speechless as the rest of the figure emerged, striding forth with a human-like gait. A tree woman broke free from the fog's embrace. Black vines cascaded from her head, weaving and curling like living strands of hair and tipped with silver. The most notable feature was a single vertical eye in the center of her forehead that locked onto Stella. The tree woman stepped forward, and where her bare wooden feet touched the earth, it cracked, not from weight, but from power. The mystic she that clung to her form like an ethereal cloak twisted and flickered as it turned into a sea of eyes. Stella mobilized she to her eyes and confirmed her suspicions. "Everyone, lower your weapons," she said. "This isn't a monster." The tree woman strode past a bewildered Grand Elder Redclaw and paused before Stella. The woman's lips curled into a knowing smile, and her violet eyes glowed brighter. "Head priestess, I have returned." "Elysia." Stella pinched the bridge of her nose and sighed. "What in the 9 layers of hell have you done to yourself?" Everyone present exchanged a knowing look and also relaxed. Diana rolled her eyes and recalled her wings. All of that worry over this nutcase, she clicked her tongue. Why can't she just leave the mystic realm like a normal person? The crazed mist-shroud girl ignored Diana's comments as she was far too busy looking up at Ashlock's canopy and reaching up as if trying to grasp at his branches 100 meters above them. I have come closer to our god's true form." "Yeah, I can see that," Stella said as she crossed her arms. She was not amused at all. "But how? Did you know this text is from a different site? Read the official version to support the creator." Elysia slowly looked at her. "Do you remember that divine gift you gave me?" "Not really." "The seed of our god," she yelled. Stella blinked. "The seed? Oh, do you mean one of Ashlock's demonic tree seeds?" Yes, that one. Do you remember?" "I guess so," Stella said, vaguely recalling such a thing. "Matherion. I raised a tree from that divine seed with the plan of using it as a focal point for the religion should the all-seeing eye ever leave this land and return to his higher plane. But after conversing with the all-seeing eye about it, I devised a better idea." Stella raised a brow. "Right, go on." "Matherion's progress was too slow, and being left in the tainted cloud sect was risky. So my plan was to bring Matherion into my soul and then grow an infant soul inside him. Since Matherion came from the divine seed of our god, that would make my infant soul compatible with him like his descendants." "Whoa, stop right there. What, huh?" Stella's brain was getting fried by Elysia's nonsense that had somehow become reality. "You brought a tree into your soul?" Elysia nodded. "And how did you do that exactly?" Stella said dryly. She had felt inadequate about failing to ascend to the nascent soul realm. Yet Elysia had not only reached the nascent soul realm but treated it as some nonsense experiment. "I believed it was the best way to serve my god, so I did it." "That is not an answer, and you know it," Stella grumbled. Nothing about Elisa, her family, or her affinity made any sense. Mystic she seemed to make her more delusional and nonsensical by the day. "Hold on, did you say you're growing your infant soul inside Matherion?" "Yep," Elysia replied with a beaming smile, yet Stella felt her world was crashing down around her. If that was true, didn't that make Elysia's infant soul growing inside one of his offspring technically Tree's first human daughter? Not only was this woman progressing in cultivation at a faster rate, but she was now genetically related to Tree? Did Ash really agree to this? Her mind was spinning, and her vision darkened. Anger toward Elysia festered at the corners of her mind, and her star core began to hum. Stella was falling into despair and didn't know what to do, but a small hand grasping her thumb brought her back to reality. Stella looked to her side and saw Jasmine giving her a reassuring smile. "Does that make you Ashlock's offspring?" Jasmine said calmly as she continued to hold Stella's hand. Stella froze at Jasmine's question and awaited Elysia's answer. "No, the all-seeing eye's children are divine beings," Elysia adamantly replied. her tone suddenly deathly serious. I am merely his vessel. My soul is for him to use as he deems fit. That is what my infant soul and Matherion are being raised for. Stella's hand fell to her side as the strength and tension left her body. Ah, our god has returned, Elysia said as she stood. Stella felt it as well. The chill of ruin crept through the air like a phantom before gathering into one location and forming a tear through reality. Everyone came to gather around the portal. Stella nodded at Douglas and Elaine, who came to her side. It seems they have both progressed in cultivation. I wonder if Elaine has learned any useful combat techniques? What's happening? Elaine asked. I think Ash found Jasmine's little monster friend, Stella replied, and she squeezed her disciple's hand as the little girl was still clutching her thumb. They exchanged a glance, and Stella mouthed, "Thank you." Her disciple returned a smile. Stella had lost control of herself a moment ago. But her disciple had brought her back. While she was still a little unnerved by what Elysia had done, as it had most likely been done without Ash's consent, it wasn't her place to get angry. Elysia was a valuable and fiercely loyal sect member, and Stella respected her for that. She was just very strange and had a unique approach to things that were apparently working extremely well. Oh, it seems quite a few people have returned while I was gone. Ash said through Anubis, the nascent Soul Realm Shadow Lich who had been silently standing off to the side until now. Sorry about that, I had to find Jasmine's monster pet before the Mystic Realm closed. Anyway, I think this is him? It matched the description and was munching on my Mystic Realm Warp fruit. The Desolation Rift pulsed, and a chest-height mantis fell through. It seemed disoriented for a moment as it got its footing, though once it gathered its senses, it looked terrified. Its chitinous exoskeleton changed color like a chameleon to match the purple grass it was standing on, which only made it stand out more. The poor thing quivered as it was stared down by a ring of curious cultivators, including many star core realms and a handful of nascent soul realms. Anubis placed his skeletal-like hand on the monster's head. Was this the one, Jasmine? Yes, thank you, Ashlock, for finding him. Jasmine let go of Stella's thumb and ran forward. The monster instantly recognized her, letting out a happy-sounding clicking noise at her approach. Jasmine, you said this was a baby monster. Catherine shouted, and she didn't seem to give a damn about the glances shot her way. When you said a baby mantis, I thought about something that could fit in the palm of your hand. It's as big as you. So, it's still a baby. Jasmine had to reach up to pat the monster on the head. See, it's harmless, mother. Just because it didn't bite your head off when a dozen cultivators were watching it doesn't mean it won't do so in the future. Catherine pointed out, while Stella knew they were likely unnecessary worries. It was true that cultivators were quite vulnerable while cultivating, especially during Ascensions. Even for a baby monster like this, it has enough intelligence to know trying to bite Jasmine's head off here would result in death. But there were no guarantees in the future. Stella crouched before the mantis and looked into its round bug eyes. She could almost smell its fear. Little mantis, my dear disciple here has taken a liking to you. What do you think? Do you accept her as your master? It shuddered and lowered its head to the floor. Master, stop bullying him. Jasmine protested. Oh, I'm only getting started. Stella brought a few truffles and fruits from her spatial ring and set them down before the mantis. These truffles will improve your spirit roots, and these fruits assist in cultivation, but more importantly, this fruit gives you language comprehension. I know you don't understand most of what I'm saying, but, she unleashed a hint of her soul pressure, making the insect squeak. You are terribly weak, too weak for my disciple to trust her life to. Stella snapped her fingers, and Guppy slithered out of the ether. Monsters advance in cultivation from killing and devouring others. Go with Guppy to the front lines and fight as many Soulfire Realm monsters as possible. If you reach the Starcore Realm, I will allow you to return and be Jasmine's guard. Stella turned to Jasmine, is this acceptable? Jasmine nodded. I understand that a weak monster is only a risk to me. Master. Good. Stella grinned, and Jasmine, you may have had one of the most historic jumps in cultivation the sect has seen so far, but you should still train hard. Nature Chi is all around us, and I expect great things from you. Jasmine looked excited, but Catherine rested a hand on her daughter's head. She can train later, but first, I wanted to inform you all about the funeral being held. Funeral? Stella's eyes widened. For who? Did Julian die? No. Thankfully, Julian is fine. Catherine said calmly, it's for the millions of people who died during the Ashfallen sect's battle with Vincent Nitros. The overall mood in Darklight and Ashfallen City has been quite dire since the incident. Ashlock saw this as an opportunity to bring the mortals closer and reaffirm their belief in the all-seeing eye, which has been faltering. While Julian and I survived that night, some of our close friends from Slimere did not. I wanted to take Jasmine to the funeral as I think it's important for her to see what the actions of the powerful can cause on the mortals. That's a fantastic idea, Douglas said, though this sounds more than a simple funeral. Catherine nodded. We are going to plant Ashlock's seeds along the road between the cities, and we're hoping Elysia and the rest of the Mistshroud family could use their mystic chi to bless the seeds in the name of the all-seeing eye. We want people to feel like they are burying the souls to rest and that they may start a new life as a spirit tree. Elysia stepped forward and bowed deeply. The gnarled black wood that had seemed so real faded away from her face, revealing a girl with violet eyes and silver-tinted black hair. It would be my honor to carry out such a service in the name of the all-seeing eye. Catherine clasped Elysia's still wood-covered hands. No, it's us who are honored. Sorry to interrupt. The cultivators parted to the side, and a gloomy man with long black hair like rotting wood, which hid half his face, stepped forward. Stella knew this man. He was the Grand Elder of the Blightbane family and possessed death affinity. It hasn't been that long since the battle, and due to the confusion and resentment of the deceased, many souls should still linger. He held up a ghostly blue flower between his withered fingers. We found these flowers in our pocket realm. We believe these ghostly flowers can help capture and nurture wandering souls. Elysia's eyes widened. If that's true, I can definitely save them. I even learned how to infuse souls into trees during my ascension. The Blightbane Grand Elder nodded. I believe if we work together, we can make this a truly special event for the mortals who put their trust in us. He chuckled raspily. It will also be a rare opportunity to show our skills. Elysia grinned wildly. When is the funeral? Tonight, Catherine said. Millions will be in attendance. Chapter 433, An Unexpected Ascension. Ashlock appreciated Catherine taking the lead in informing everyone about the funeral. For some reason, he felt that if he were to speak about the funeral plans, it would carry less weight. It felt so much more genuine coming from Catherine. The scene of a mortal mother clasping hands with a nascent soul realm cultivator was moving for everyone present. Well, except for the mantis, the poor little bug likely had no idea what the hell was going on. Despite the harsh words from Stella, he agreed with her plan regarding Jasmine's pet. It was too weak to fight anything and too untamed for Jasmine to keep around as a guard while cultivating. But Ashlock was curious about the mantis's camouflage capabilities, as that was a capability his Ents and summons lacked. Though, that would be for later. Right now, he had some questions, especially for the vice-cult leader of the all-seeing eye, Elysia Mistshroud. However, he first needed to get mortals like Catherine and weaker cultivators off Red Vine Peak to avoid breaking their minds with his evil eye as he analyzed the stronger sect members. Tapping into his spatial Tao rather than his now easier to control Desolation Chi, he created a few perfectly clear portals leading to various locations. He then ordered Anubis to stand before the portals to present them. Those below the Star Core realm who want to participate in the funeral, please take your leave, Ashlock said through Anubis and had the towering Shadow Lich gesture to the open portals. Everyone else, please stay for a moment so I can assess your growth in power. Bidding farewell, the Redclaw youths left first. As they went, Ashlock checked them with his spiritual sense. Some were on the edge of reaching the Star Core realm, which was crazy to think, as the Redclaw Grand Elder had been the only member of the Redclaw family in the Star Core realm just a year ago. Yet now, every Elder and even Amber, a member of the younger generation, was at that level. A small horde of mudcloaks waddled through the portals next, and Ashlock felt like scratching his non-existent head since they were supposed to be living on Red Vine Peak. I guess they have some business to tend to elsewhere? Ashlock chuckled, imagining them in little suits and holding a serious business meeting. Overall, it seemed their cultivation levels had increased across the board, but none were at the peak of the Star Core realm just yet. Though the day a nascent soul realm mudcloak stepped out of the mystic realm didn't seem too far away. Next to leave was Jasmine along with her mother Catherine. However, on their way out, Jasmine encountered an old rival waiting beside the portal, Sam. Oddly, a mudcloak stood at Sam's side, holding a small stick like a sage and looking mysterious. This mudcloak also happened to have the highest cultivation realm that Ashlock had felt from the little monsters. However, he couldn't get an accurate read as he assessed through his spiritual senses rather than his evil eye. You've grown stronger, my little rival, but so have I though. I admit it's almost unbelievable that you have reached the 7th stage already. That's impressive, but don't count me out yet. I just stepped into the 3rd stage myself. Sam said, a light smile tugging at his lips. You may have Stella as your master and access to unlimited resources, but I will still surpass you one day. Outside help can only overshadow talent for so long. Before Jasmine could reply, Stella appeared behind her in a flash of white flames. She narrowed her eyes at Sam. Are you implying something? Sam was half startled to death by Stella's sudden appearance. He backed up a step and waved his hands defensively while saying, I wasn't implying anything at all. Stella snorted, if you're going to talk shit, that's fine. But at least have the spine to back up your words. The heavens don't smile kindly on cowards, and I don't appreciate people belittling my disciple. Stella ruffled Jasmine's hair. Yes, she has me as a master and access to more resources than most. But she made a historic jump in cultivation this round. 5 stages in 1 month, not even I can do that. Attributing that success solely to outside factors is disingenuous, you know? Master, it's fine. Jasmine tried to protest, but Stella was having none of it. Have you also lost your spine? Stella turned on her own disciple with a look of disappointment. I don't suggest going around and killing or fighting people over every transgression against you, but come on. This is a good opportunity. A little rivalry to get the blood pumping. Stella stood between them and had her hands on their shoulders, much to their confusion and embarrassment. Cat got your tongues? If one of you doesn't speak up, I'm going to have you both participate in a strict training regime. Okay. Jasmine seemed panicked by the prospect of the strict training regime as she pulled one of Stella's spatial rings off her finger and forced it into a bewildered Sam's hand. Stella doesn't teach me much, and this ring probably contains a lot of cultivation resources. Let's both do our best. Sam was at a loss for words as he stared at the ring in his hand and glanced between Jasmine and Stella. Is this really fine? What do you mean I don't teach you much? Stella looked like an arrow had struck her heart. Jasmine ignored her master. Her gaze was locked on Sam as she held out her hand. This should even the playing field, right? Let's both do our best. She looked deathly serious before hissing under her breath, just shake my hand. The teenager gulped as he shook the little girl's hand. Sure, you got it. Great. Jasmine beamed before grabbing her mother's hand and pulling her through the portal. Let's go. Who is that boy, Jazz? Is he your boy Fur? Catherine's voice was cut off as the portal rippled around them. However, through the portal, Ashlock could see Jasmine pointing at Sam and passionately denying her mother's question. Meanwhile, Sam was trying to hand Stella back her ring. Keep it. Stella crossed her arms, but if I don't see results from the resources you take from there, I hope you accept how inferior you are to my disciple. Sam bowed. Mark my words, I won't lose out to your disciple. Ashlock just watched on with amusement. Stella will never admit it, but I know she has a soft spot for helping children and those weaker than her. Perhaps she sees herself in some of them, or maybe she just likes helping. Guppy, take the mantis to the front lines. Stella ordered her pet, and the slithering nightmare obeyed as it began shepherding the terrified mantis toward a portal that led to the northern forest. However, the mantis froze in place as they passed the mystic realm fog, and Guppy soon followed suit. Both monsters' eyes were locked onto the fog as if they were being stared down by a predator. What are you two waiting for? Stella shouted, but neither moved an inch. Annoyed, she strode over but then seemed to feel it too. Her eyes narrowed. What's that? A serpentine shadow supporting 2 golden eyes that cut through the mist was slithering through the mystical fog toward them. The fog parted as it came to the forefront, and a sleek inked black head peeked through. The monster's skin seemed more fluid than solid, rippling with every movement. Kada. Diana's voice rang with joy as she leapt into the air, her arms outstretched. She collided with the midnight ink lindworm before he had fully emerged in a fierce embrace. Her arms barely encircled his thickened frame as he had grown in the short time they had been apart, and his scales were all restored. While Diana patted Kada, He radiated a divine aura befitting his most recent evolution. And he seemed to be brimming with power. Despite being Stella's pet and far larger, Guppy lowered his head in reverence before Kada. Meanwhile, the poor soul Fire Realm bug was quivering. Kada snorted in amusement and used his forelegs to pull himself across the cracked stone onto the purple grass that encircled Ashlock's trunk. This text was taken from Royal Road. Help the author by reading the original version there. Ashlock didn't need a system prompt to know what his summon wanted. It was obvious the Lindworm had finally gathered enough chi to surpass the B grade. Kada planted his forehead on Ashlock's trunk and multiple system messages flashed in his consciousness. Kada has accumulated enough chi to evolve to a grade. A single evolution option has been made available. Midnight Ink Lindworm. Kada wishes to evolve. Yes, no. This was quite an unexpected development, as it was hard to tell how close his summons were to evolution compared to cultivators that simply moved up stages. I can't believe it's finally time for Kada, who was once a little F-grade grass snake, to ascend to A grade. Ashlock was honestly overjoyed. Despite his cultivation lagging behind Larry due to his lower starting grade, Kada had proved his worth time and time again. Even at B grade, the ink snake had the potential to unleash unfathomable destruction if he expended all his scales. Just out of curiosity, what was his last evolution message? Midnight Ink Lindworm, B grade. As a lesser evolution of the Midnight Inkwing, Kada would inherit the blood of a divine being from the upper layers of creation, granting him unlimited cultivation potential. Midnight Ink Lindworms have snake-like bodies made entirely from divine ink. Their bodies are also covered in black scales of hardened ink that they can use as a medium to affect the world, such as creating talismans or runic arrays out of their scales. They also can infuse their will through their divine ink to create contracts overseen by the heavens. Also, due to the connection with the divine, Midnight Ink Lindworms can gain heavenly insight from words written in ink. It had been a substantial upgrade from his C-grade evolution, as he had consumed the flesh from a divine being's offspring, the Midnight Inkwing. Thankfully, the mother of those eggs had yet to track them down. I do feel quite bad for the Midnight Inkwing, but there's a chance I wouldn't even be here right now if not for stealing those eggs. By consuming them, Larry became far stronger than he would have been. And I also used them to make the Phantom Veil amulet, which kept Stella safe during the saga with Vincent Nitros. Diana stood beside Kada, grinning. Is Kada going to get stronger? Oh, most certainly, Ashlock replied with abyssal whispers, as the weaker people had left. Everyone left standing on the peak had enough mental fortitude to resist his words. System. Show me the evolution option. It made sense that there would only be one evolution path, as his previous upgrade had included a in the name, meaning it had unlimited potential. If anything, this evolution was simply a formality rather than a choice. Celestial Ink Dragon. While Midnight Inkwings are considered one of the apex divine beings that possess the ink affinity, there exists its ancestor, the Celestial Ink Dragon. Thought to be extinct, the Celestial Ink Dragon possesses a long, flowing body of divine ink that at their maximum length can span between dimensions. Rumored to be the ancient scholars of the heavens, Celestial Ink Dragons have heightened comprehension of heavenly texts, allowing them to decipher even the most complex runes, lost techniques, or divine edicts inscribed in ink. However, the biggest difference between the lesser Midnight Inkwing and the Celestial Ink Dragon's scales is that the Celestial Ink Dragon can shed their scales and control them from range, letting them dominate battlefields with floating talismans, formations, or binding even demi-gods with their divine contracts. Ashlock just stared at the explanation in disbelief. Holy shit, Kada is going to evolve into the ancestor of the Midnight Inkwing? It was one thing for Larry to evolve into the Herald of the Divine Ash, but that evolution sounded like a unique divine being. However, evolving into one believed to be extinct? That's a completely different ballgame. For instance, if the Midnight Inkwing tracked us down, would she bow before Kada now? And how will other dragons react if they meet him? Coming to terms with the whole Kada evolving into an extinct divine being and moving on to what a Celestial Ink Dragon was actually capable of made Ashlock even more excited. The ability to comprehend heavenly texts was bound to become useful as they moved up the layers of creation and got closer to the heavens. What really piqued his interest, though, was the Celestial Dragon's ability to shed their scales and manipulate them from range. The number of combat possibilities that opens up is insane. Ashlock mused. Right now, Kada can inscribe basically anything into his scales, but two main factors are holding him back. First, growing and inscribing the scale takes a lot of time and chi, and they are consumed in the process of casting the technique, making them single use. The second problem is that everything has to originate from him since the scales are attached to his body. For example, if he inscribed a barrier technique, he could only cast it on himself rather than for someone else. This led him to focus on more offensive techniques, but with this, he can create floating formations that could cover massive areas. Ashlock realized he had gotten lost in his excitement and Kada was still pressing his head on his trunk, awaiting his decision on if he could evolve or not. Yes, Kada, I approve of your evolution. Evolution path. Celestial Ink Dragon, chosen, evolution initiating. With that done, Ashlock turned his attention to the elephant in the room, or should he say the tree woman on the mountain peak. Elysia had reached nascent soul realm. He had expected as much as she had been at the 9th stage of the star core realm before going in. What he hadn't anticipated was whatever this was. Elysia, care to explain yourself? What followed was a nearly incompressible ramble in true deranged Elysia style. While peering at her with his evil eye and cross-checking her words, he managed to piece together the important bits. Okay, so she hasn't turned into an ent as I suspected. That bark is a soul avatar created from mystic chi. And it has taken on that appearance because she somehow implanted her infant soul inside Matherion. It reminds me of how the Lunar Shade Grand Elder used his infant soul as spiritual armor during the Tainted Cloud sect fight. Ashlock mused as he stared at Elysia, pointedly ignoring how she seemed to shudder in ecstasy. Sure enough, growing in her soul was Matherion. The little tree's roots clung to Elysia's soul like an octopus to a rock, and if he dug even deeper, inside Matherion's trunk was Elysia's infant soul. Ashlock's gaze shifted to Magnus Redclaw. In comparison, the Grand Elder of the Redclaw family's soul had transformed into a spiritual volcano, with what he assumed to be the man's infant soul floating above its rim like a blazing sun of hellfire. Grand Elder Redclaw, did you unlock a new affinity? The man smiled, not quite an affinity yet, but I gained deep insight into a Tao. As I faced the heavens' wrath, they tested my resolve. I answered that I wanted to become the bedrock of my family. Dependable and unmoving like a mountain, yet able to erupt with hellfire to wipe out our foes when necessary. It seems the heavens smiled upon my resolve, and I achieved enlightenment in volcanic Tao. That is indeed a fitting Tao to comprehend for you, Ashlock said, and Magnus gave a slight bow of appreciation. Ashlock's evil eye then switched targets to the only couple in the sect's inner circle, Douglas and Elaine. Hold on. Douglas, you went up 3 whole stages? Ashlock said with genuine surprise. Unless he was remembering wrong, Douglas had been at the 2nd stage of the star core realm, yet he was now in the 5th. Haha, Douglas chuckled as he scratched the back of his head. I had a fortunate revelation recently that dispelled what had been holding me back until now. What was that? Stella asked, clearly interested. I realized I'm not built for fighting, Douglas shrugged. That's it? Stella squinted at him. It's the truth. I felt like I was constantly playing catch-up with everyone and kept beating myself up over failing. Do you remember as a kid, if you had something important to do the following morning, you would go to sleep early, only to stare at the ceiling for hours? The more time passed, the more frustrated you grew with your inability to sleep, feeding the cycle. That was me, but with cultivation. Douglas tapped the ground with his walking stick. The ground rumbled as it rose up into the shape of a hand. Once I accepted fighting wasn't for me and I should focus on construction, it was like a weight was lifted from my shoulders and I could finally be me. Elaine playfully pulled on his ear. I've been telling you this for months. You should listen to me more. Yes, I'm sorry, Douglas sighed. I was seeking purpose when it was there all along. Ashlock looked at Elaine. She had gone up a more modest 2 stages, compared to Douglas's 3. But that was almost more impressive, as she had 2 affinities she had to cultivate at once, with one of them being void. Big sister, an all too familiar voice called out as the mystic realm finally dissipated. The last 2 to leave was Riker and Sebastian Silverspire. The kid had somehow jumped from the 1st to the 4th stage of the star core realm. He really is a heaven-sent prodigy, Ashlock sighed, wondering if he was in the presence of the true protagonist of this world. In comparison, poor Sebastian had been overshadowed, having only advanced one stage and now being multiple stages behind the 5-year-old young master he was meant to be guarding. Sebastian met his evil eye's gaze with the steel-like resolve Ashlock expected from a seasoned metal affinity cultivator. However, the stream of metal orbiting the man betrayed his restlessness. "Speak, Sebastian, what's on your mind?" The silver-haired man bowed slightly. "I apologize for my haste, but are the preparations for the visit to the Silverspire residence ready? I just received a concerning message sent days ago from Riker's mother and wish to return to Argentum as soon as possible." "Concerning is certainly one way of putting it," Ashlock said as he opened a desolation rift above Red Vine Peak and lowered Moros through it. "Transportation is prepared, but the situation has become complicated." "How so?" Stella asked as she curiously eyed Moros along with the others. "There's a Monarch Realm spatial cultivator hailing from the Celestial Empire along with many Star Core Realm enforcers at the Silverspire residence," Ashlock said and gave pause to let the gravity of his words set in. "What?" Sebastian's eyes widened in shock. "How did you learn of this?" "I had a fight with him," Ashlock admitted, "and he stole my sword."